particularly poignant time as we reach something of a tipping point. So looking at ComScore data for June, mobile has now just become the most popular way for readers to log on to the websites of Mail Online, Metro, and The Mirror. And according to ABC, Mail Online is accessed by 55 million unique browsers in the UK alone, which is 10 million more people than have the internet in the UK, which tells us two things. One, that the ABC monthly website totals are a bit iffy, and two, that people are logging onto these websites from lots of different devices now, and they're being counted many times by ABC. At the other end of the market, tablet subscriptions have become a serious part of the circulation of the Times, and the Sunday Times here in particular. They're the two most read UK newspaper digital editions, with average readerships of 72,000 and 95,000 respectively. So serious numbers when you think that they're all paying punters. And interesting that the people who are paying to subscribe to newspapers are logging onto digital editions more than the people who get them for free for some reason. So the growing mobile readership for journalism and the shift from desktop to mobile has brought its own challenges. If we thought websites viewed on desktops were hard to monetize, the limited scope to display ads on smaller mobile screens makes mobiles even tougher. So today, what we're hoping to do is find out a little bit more about two things: how people are making journalism work on mobile and on tablets, and how they're making it pay. It's a hugely important issue for anyone who cares about the future of quality journalism. So I think News UK are good eggs, really, to open their doors to some of their competitors in some cases, so that we can get together and look for some answers to these important things together. A few housekeeping things. If people would like to get onto Wi-Fi, they click on GuestNet, then the password is guest1, so GuestNet and then guest1. We should be on air now with a Google Hangout. So there was a live video broadcast that hopefully we're going out to all our Google Plus followers and other people who on Twitter who follow Press Gazette. So we'll email you the link to that tomorrow, and you can have the YouTube link so you can watch this whole thing again if you'd like to. And if you look at the back there, we've got Alex Hughes from Drawnelism. So a bit of fun. He's going to be depicting this afternoon's conference using cartoons. So just to show that print media is far from dead. So have a look at those. It should be a bit of fun, and feel free to tweet. And if people would like to tweet today, the hashtag is NOTM3. So hashtag is NOTM3. So before we move on to our three roundtable discussions, I'd like to first introduce our keynote speaker, the Chief Executive of the Sun, Times and Sunday Times publisher, News UK, Mike Darcy. Go this way.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Building, our new home is News UK. Hope you're enjoying the view and the lunch. Sorry about the lack of wine. We did think about it, but decided not. As you can see from the screen, we've spent most of the summer moving in here, so the title of this conference feels peculiarly apt to us. News, in our case, has quite literally been on the move. It also feels like we've moved on quite a bit in the 2 years that have now nearly passed since I took a particular phone call. And there it is. Back then, it was Rupert, of course, asking me somewhat out of the blue if I would leave Sky and to take charge of News International, as was, moving from West London over to Wapping. I reminded Rupert that I'd only ever done pay TV for him at that point, and I'd never worked in newspapers. He said it didn't matter, and what he wanted me for was what I knew about the subscription business. It was, well, let's just say it was an interesting time to take over. This company had some fairly serious challenges of its own making that it was still working through. And the industry itself, many thought, was in terminal decline, with some genuinely questioning whether newspapers were going to survive at all. Even worse, it wasn't obvious to everyone why anyone might care. But we've come quite a long way since those initial impressions. And for us in this building, at least, a key part of that journey has been to think hard and to think often about our fundamental purpose. And today, what I want to do is just dwell on that core purpose as a bit of background to the detailed mobile discussions to come. Now, I'm a relative newcomer to this industry, but I was struck from the moment I arrived by the strong sense of purpose that it enjoys. Now, I'd had some experience of a sense of purpose from my time at Sky, that's certainly true. But this place, it's in another league entirely.
I'm incredibly curious. My mum would say I'm nosy. I want to see things for myself. And I'm really determined. Like, there's nowhere I haven't got into. Nowhere is like a starting point, okay, for me. I want to tell the stories of people who have no way of getting their own stories told. If I see something that's really shocking that's happening, I want people outside to know about it, and I want them to know about it because I hope that that will change. To me, you know, often the real heroes or heroines in the war are the people that are still managing to educate and feed their children. That's the sort of story I really want to tell, much more than this sort of bang bang, if you like.
So we set about, as we've recently tried to illustrate in a series of films like this one, to remind ourselves and others why world-class, independent, professional journalism matters, and then to make that the core of our business strategy. Now, of course, I'm not saying that every single article and every publication reflects some sort of noble purpose. Newspapers, well, they're not always nice, they're not always pretty, but we are a bundle of content, and at the core of that bundle is news, making people think, making them question, making them imagine. A celebrity front page can sometimes look a little thin on noble intention, but if it draws in a reader who then stumbles on the shrewd political analysis of Trevor Kavanagh or the playful commentary of Tony Parsons, it is serving that core purpose indirectly. The Sun in Scotland these days is edited by a former showbiz reporter, but that didn't stop Gordon Smart from publishing more than 1,100 pieces on independence over the last few months. Indeed, I've been profoundly struck over recent months by the enduring relevance and impact of our journalism, and I just wanted to give you 3 recent examples to dwell on. The first is the Sunday Times expose of corruption surrounding the 2022 Qatar bid for the World Cup. Now, there had been questions about this bid floating around for some time, but it took the power of a brand like the Sunday Times to give the story true depth and reach. The depth came from some remarkable work by the Insight team, Jonathan Calvert and Heidi Blake, who revealed a cache of documents showing the secret payments that had helped Qatar to win the bid. The reach came from the Sunday Times, what had started out as intriguing rumors into a global story that then shook the foundations of FIFA. According to Kantar Media, the work of these 2 skilled individuals reached an amazing total potential audience of 1.3 billion people around the world. Now, that is an enormous relevance and impact, and I think that's not bad for a conversation that began behind a so-called paywall. The second is the Times' focus on the sexual exploitation of young people in care in Rotherham. Following a series of prosecutions of men in Rotherham, Rochdale, Derby, and Oxford, Times reporter Andrew Norfolk began investigating the role of the police and the child protection agencies in failing to stop these offences. Details from 200 restricted access documents were published in the Times, showing that those in positions of responsibility had had extensive knowledge of those activities for a decade. And those articles prompted the independent investigation in Rotherham, which reported in August of this year and revealed the incredible story of 1,400 victims. Andrew rightly has received industry awards for his work, which took courage and sensitivity in modern multicultural Britain. It's difficult to imagine a story with greater impact or relevance to our politics and society. Third, I want to mention the Sun's coverage of the evolving crisis in Iraq. This has been a huge story for most papers, but As is often the case, it takes a Sun front page for the content of a story really to break through. I love Big Baghdadi, not just because of the pun, because the headline brought the story to life and got it being discussed on the airwaves and across the country. And accessibility is the key here. The Sun has an enduring power to get an important story beyond the metropolitan elite and getting it discussed in the pubs and the workplaces of Britain. Now, I'm not arguing that newspapers are the only place where news happens. Social media also provide a constant news drumbeat which can reach millions instantly. It certainly provides reach, but can you always trust it? And amongst the cacophony of opinions, who do you listen to? Who do you take seriously? And do the bloggers always have the resources needed for sustained, effective journalism? Broadcast news is trusted and has ample resources, but tends to lack the depth of analysis that some stories require, needing to reduce complex issues to simple sound bites for a short news bulletin. Even Panorama is being scaled back, we now hear. And with a legal requirement to be unbiased, comment and opinion is not a strong feature of the UK television news offering. Further, publicly funded news, whilst a great British tradition, relies on Parliament for its funding and is never very far away from a charter review or a funding review, and so inevitably has to operate with a degree of compromise and coyness. This means that the role of newspapers remains highly distinctive. We sustain detailed investigations that confront the controversies that others avoid, offering the public independent, rigorous, and trusted news. We offer comment and opinion worth listening to with real authority and insight. We provide reach, but also depth of analysis that isn't always easy to capture in a TV soundbite or 140 characters. Broadcasters duly report the comings and goings, the claims and the counterclaims, and the set-piece proceedings. But where's the real story? That's often down to us. So it's no surprise that TV broadcasters begin most mornings looking at the newspapers to establish the day's news agenda. Nowhere is this more true than in the coverage of politics. Two longs. We are, as everyone knows, I think less than 7 months away from the UK general election, an event that could have a profound impact on the future of the country, not to mention the careers of several of our politicians. Many of the journalists here today, I'm sure, are no doubt relishing the prospect. Now, there's something about politics that attracts the counterfactual question, and the impending campaign got me thinking, what would politics be like if professional journalists ceased to exist? What if the newspaper industry failed to navigate the digital revolution, our papers all closed, or at least were reduced to a small pool of journalists aggregating and republishing news generated by others? How would elections be different? And how about our democracy itself? Well, newspapers have played an important role in our political system, certainly since 1785 and the launch of the Daily Universal Register, as the Times was originally called. The first edition said that it was created to record the principal occurrences of the times and to abridge the account of debates during the sitting of Parliament. We still play that role today, albeit with, I hope, a slightly clearer page layout. But what if papers ceased to exist? What would we miss? Well, in asking this question, I'm thinking beyond the partisan loyalties of different titles. If you're a Conservative, you might be delighted if The Guardian ceased to exist. And even if you're the Labour leadership, there might be occasions when you wouldn't mind that prospect either. Of course, different papers have supported different parties over the years. The Times, for example, over the last 70 years has backed Labour, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and none. At any one moment, depending on your political leaning, you might prefer that the Times existed or not. But my question is a deeper one. What would be lost to politics if, regardless of their individual political leanings, all newspapers and their pool of professional journalists ceased to exist? There would still be news of a sort. We would still have TV broadcasters and their websites, as well as aggregators and social media. But how would it feel without the newspapers? Well, let me offer you 4 things that I'd miss about politics without the professional journalism provided by a thriving newspaper industry. First, I'd miss the facts. We rely on newspapers to act as a record of the political events of the day, the source for accurate information about what's going on in Westminster and beyond. Their pages create the space for the detail, often glossed over by TV or radio and ignored by an under-resourced website. And the details are made easy to understand and explore, with designers organizing information into charts and graphics to ease the experience. Then there's opinion polling, which newspapers pay for in substantial quantity and is an essential feature of our recently launched Redbox email. The first poll, commissioned by a UK title, I'm told, was in the News Chronicle in 1938 for the Fulham West by-election. Since then, polls have become an essential component of political coverage, and today we poll the UK public almost every day for The Sun, The Times, and The Sunday Times. And that's a huge data bank available publicly for analysis and dissection by the political geeks. And our Redbox email offers a daily update with high-quality political analysis and comment and exclusive YouGov polls, free for those looking for even more insight. Then there's the debate. Politics is rooted in the battle of ideas, and newspapers remain the natural home of the political debate. Even within the pages of The Times and The Sun, we offer a range of views, and across the industry, we cover all angles. We also provide a platform for the opinions of politicians themselves, even if occasionally they may regret giving them. A great example of how newspapers can really foster a debate is the recent independence referendum in Scotland.
For Scottish independence looks set to go to the wire with a new opinion poll showing the Yes campaign inching ahead for the first time. Today's YouGov poll for the Sunday Times shows 51% support for independence, with 49% against.
So yes, it was the Sunday Times poll, for better or for worse, showing the yes camp ahead and throwing the no camp into turmoil, and it then sparked an entirely new debate about the sort of powers that might be devolved if Scotland voted to retain the Union. But we've also commissioned some research specifically looking at the role of newspapers in the referendum debate, and I want to share the results with you today. The research showed that 60% of Scottish voters got a significant or a very large amount of information about the issues, the campaigns, the debates about independence from newspapers and their websites. And this compares to 54% who said they got a lot of information from social media and 44% who said they got a lot from the yes and no camps directly. So just think about that for a minute. In the recent Scottish referendum, held at a time when the digital revolution is in full flow, newspapers played a more significant role than social media or the campaigns themselves in the debate. Newspapers remain central to healthy political debate, and the Scottish referendum just proved it. Third, where there is politics, there is sometimes scandal and controversy. And newspapers play an invaluable role in shining a light on this, highlighting hypocrisy and exposing corruption. The best example of this in recent times is, of course, the Westminster expenses scandal. The story was broken not by one of my papers, but by the Daily Telegraph. And they provided in-depth analysis of individual MPs' expenses, something that required weeks of preparation and significant expense. There was also considerable political risk in breaking the story. It's difficult to imagine a broadcaster like the BBC or ITV, for example, being prepared to run such a story first, especially when they are required by license to be impartial. Although uncomfortable for many politicians, few would deny that politics is now better for these issues having been brought to light, and that only happened because a newspaper was willing to publish them. And fourth, of course, there's the satire and the fun.
I've got to have silence. If I got noise going on, I can't draw straight. And I'm sort of isolated in here, and there's just total silence. I just concentrate on the drawing in hand, and I just can't give it more attention than I do.
David Cameron has always been desperate to get away from his sort of old Etonian past, and Peter keeps bringing this back again and again.
I've always enjoyed drawing Cameron because he's got a wonderful Tory face and beautifully smooth, unblemished skin.
Politics would be very dull without the newspapers to keep us smiling, whether it's the wonderful humour of the parliamentary sketch writers or the brilliance of the political cartoon. Cartoons have a unique ability to sum up the issue, as does the Sun's front page. How could we have an election without the Sun? Some of the best Sun headlines have focused on political issues, and the conference rooms on the Sun floors below have been named after some of those most famous headlines. So if it's not too pompous, when debating our business strategies, I believe we should start with a sense of purpose. And when pondering our purpose, we should remind ourselves that strong democracies need strong media, able to keep the public informed about the actions of their government and the decisions that they take in our name. Professional journalism is not about being cheerleaders for politics, but in providing a sustained focus for public life, we provide valuable space for politicians whose legitimacy depends on their ability to engage a skeptical and often disinterested audience. Politics is too important to be left to the spin doctory of party press offices alone or the rumour mills of social media. It needs detailed analysis and courageous debate, something that newspapers do particularly well. This is not to claim that newspapers have a monopoly on political truth. Politics is stronger when there's a spectrum of opinions. Listen to a radio phone-in any day of the week, and you'll be quickly reminded that the world is not short of opinions. This is especially true of Twitter. In one day on Twitter, you can read millions of different opinions, some controversial, some insightful, and those are just the tweets from Rupert. But for those who follow politics, we crave sound above the noise, the melody, rather than the random notes. Newspapers remain the home of journalism that makes you think. We have the credibility, the skill, and the nerve to pose the important questions. Our proposition, our role remains distinctive within the pantheon of news offerings. And happily, this also represents a foundation for our economic success, because something distinctive and valuable might just be worth paying for. And if we keep that in mind, I believe that newspapers will continue to have a major relevance and impact for many years to come. So thank you for listening to these thoughts today. Granted, I've only worked in this industry for a couple of years, but these are views that I've held personally for some time. I arrived in the UK in 1989 and was immediately struck by the presence of 12 national daily newspapers and the extraordinary variety of views expressed so vigorously therein. I come from Wellington in New Zealand, and so grew up with two city-based newspapers, one in the morning and one in the evening, and even they have since merged into one. Perhaps because of the paucity of outlets, they took a fairly cautious and neutral line. And they sat against the backdrop of a similarly bland state-owned broadcaster. So I've always thought that the high level of plurality in the newspaper industry in the UK here is precious, something to be proud of, something to be treasured. So I was truly honoured to be asked to play a role in the evolution of this industry from its print-only past to its digital and mobile future. The various publishers represented here today are pursuing different business models, and I won't get drawn today into a long debate about the relative merits of those models. You've probably heard enough from me on that in the past. But I think we're all trying to achieve basically the same thing. We're all trying to evolve a sustainable model for the future because we think professional journalism is vital for our country and its success. We think a lot about this in this building, on the editorial floors, but on the other floors too. And I guess everyone else here today does as well. But we do need to talk to people outside this room as well. We need to remind people what makes us special, remind them how our journalism makes a positive impact, and remind them what would be lost if we were not around. Let's make that the focus of what we're trying to preserve, because it's a good thing to do. It truly is a job worth doing, and because it's a pretty good foundation for our commercial success too. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Where's he gone? Ethan, thanks.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Mike Darcy. Really inspiring to see the Sunday Times Qatar World Cup coverage and Andrew Norfolk's work on child abuse. I think it's the sort of thing that really makes you kind of proud to be a journalist, not being too cheesy. So we're going to move on now to our first round table. So I'm going to invite up John Bernstein, who's going to host this one, and we're going to hear from some legacy print publishers about how they're tackling mobile and doing it successfully. So I'm going to invite up to the stage Martin Ashplant, who's the Director of Digital and Social Media at City AM, formerly of Metro. Alan Hunter from the Times and Sunday Times, Head of Digital, and Subhajit Banerjee, who's Guardian News and Media's mobile editor. So we welcome them up, please.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Dominic, thanks for that introduction. As Dominic says, my name is John Bernstein. I am a former deputy editor of The New Statesman. I was digital director there across a couple of titles, and I also spent some time as multimedia editor of the Channel 4 News at ITN, but it's not really about me, it's about this subject that we've got today. And I need to press this clicker, I think, or someone is doing something for me. Should that start working? That says Dom. Here we go. There we go. That's what we're talking about, which is all good. So, successful mobile and tablet editorial strategies for print news publishers. That's the subject. For the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to sort of throw away the traditional 10-minute presentations each, and I'm going to dive straight into some questions for our esteemed panelist. But some of the subjects that I think I want to get into the guts of, and I'm very keen to get questions from the audience as well, are the things that work for mobile, for news publishers, and the things that don't. So some lessons from the coalface. What has worked, what hasn't, what advice would you give other people faced with the same situation, and what are the commercial realities of mobile rather than desktop? And we'll explore the role of apps in a world where you might argue that responsive designed websites that render news beautifully on any device via a website might place a question mark over apps. So I'll be interested to get the panelists' view on that. And we'll look at the consumption habits. I believe that there are different consumption habits for people accessing via mobiles, different times of the day, different days of the week. How does that influence the publishing that we do, the journalism that we do? Clearly it impacts design, but it might impact output, and it might impact staffing, and it might impact a bunch of other things as well. And I think we'll also get into the numbers as we go along. So let's get on with it. So we're probably going to finish up about 3:20 today. Let me get into the questions. I'm going to start with our hosts, with Alan Hunter, who is head of digital at Times and Sunday Times. Before we get into the guts of the questions, just remind us, what is the proposition, the digital proposition from the Times and the Sunday Times? What are you offering?
So essentially what we're offering is our editions where people want them. We would say we're not really digital first, we're reader first. So wherever people want to get our content, we'll be there for them. At the heart of that is our tablet edition, which has proved very successful, which Dominic spoke about earlier, where we have about 72,000 people on a daily basis and about 93,000 on a Sunday. And one of the things we notice about that is the dwell time, is that people are spending a lot of time with these editions. So on a weekday, people are spending about 40 minutes, and on a Sunday, nearly an hour. So that's very much akin to what we've seen on print products.
So that dwell time is the same as it is in print. Is that what you're saying?
Broadly the same, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we've got a website. We've obviously got
Yes, we've got a website, and we have a smartphone app for both Android and iOS. And obviously the tablet app is across Android and Apple products as well.
And run us by the subscriber numbers. How many people are subscribing to the Times across print and across digital?
So altogether, our subscription number is 390,000. The latest figure for digital, which is released by our New York parent, is 150,000. And I have to be slightly careful about what I say about our figures, because we are an American company, and the SEC are very rigorous in pursuing people who they feel are moving markets without proper authority.
That subscriber number was
390,000.
390,000. Of that 390,000, that's people subscribing either to print only, digital only, or digital plus print. Is that right?
Yes.
And can you break that?
Well, it's 150,000 of them are digital only.
Digital only.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
rest we don't.
Okay. And when we spoke before, you talked about that tablet app as being the hero app for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It has worked incredibly well. We were very early on the tablet scene. We launched it pretty much as Apple launched the iPad, which gave us a big advantage, and we've learned a lot from that. And funnily enough, one of the things we've learned is that really people like the concept of an edition. They like the beginning, a middle, and end to their content. I mean, we can talk for a lot of time about how digital allows you to snack and to dip into products during the day. But we find that, you know, people realistically aren't going to be dipping into news products all day, every day. They have time for news, and we found that where people see something they can complete, that's very attractive.
I'm sorry to dwell on numbers. Do you have a sense of how many people who subscribe to the tablet as part of a bundle or individually, how many of them are downloading the tablet edition each day?
Well, yes, that's what our public figures are. It's about 72,000.
Are downloading each day, and the average dwell time is about 40 minutes a week.
Absolutely.
And
those are
an
public.
hour.
They're public figures. They're called publication active views. They're audited. So yeah, we're very.
And talk to me about the commercials beyond people paying for this thing, which is a rarity on the web. But in terms of the display advertising you have on tablets, what's the feedback from your advertisers? Because I guess there is a possibility as you are scrolling through that tablet app that you might very quickly scroll past some of those adverts.
Indeed, but actually we've done a lot of work on this. Abba Newbury, who's up on the next panel, will probably be best placed to talk about, but at a very high level, the research shows that people actually take in a snapshot on digital when they're flicking through, as well as they take in print where they're lingering on a page. Okay. So actually it's as good, if not better.
And let's talk about your website as well, because your website is not designed for mobile.
No, it's not a responsive website, and to be honest, we are looking at making our websites responsive. All the new designs we do, so we've recently launched, as well as the Redbox email that Mike was talking about, we have a Redbox website that I think will really come into its own during the election campaign, but that is responsibly designed, and everything we do from now on will be responsive.
And in terms of the audience that comes to your website, given that it's not currently a sort of mobile-ready website, is it fair to say that most people that come to that website are coming via desktops rather than mobile?
People who are coming to the website will come primarily from desktop. Obviously, we have kind of smartphone apps which are designed for use on a smartphone, and I think this is probably something we'll come to talk about. But 80% of people are accessing news sites through kind of dedicated applications. So I think that will.
80% of people are accessing news sites from apps.
Yes, that's the kind of the global figure.
Seems a very, very large number to me. You launched a sports tablet app as well.
And mobile app.
And mobile app, forgive me. And that was May, June time this year.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was the objective behind it? What was the purpose? What's the editorial proposition of that app?
So really the proposition of that is to be the home for your live sports coverage. As you will all no doubt know, we have live Premier League, where we have rights to Premier League clips. We also have the rights to rugby clips and cricket clips. And we realize that people are going to access these on the go, and not everyone has time to watch a whole test match, say in the summer, from 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. So the prospect of getting the clips as you go along is clear and apparent. And those have been, so far the use has been very positive. It's still very early days, but yeah, we've been very pleased with the fact that we seem to have developed a new audience among our subscriber base for this kind of content.
And we'll talk more as we go along, but just finally in this section, in terms of advice to some people out here who are going through some of the same journeys as you've been through, one piece of advice that you'd give these guys?
Well, I've actually come from print, background, so I'm not a kind of, as you can probably see by my grey beard, I'm not a digital native. But what has become very apparent to me is that really great stories are what sell digital products. And all our best hits, best dwell time are on the best stories. And I think it's no surprise that The Guardian have won loads of awards this year for their digital side because they had the Snowden files, which was a great story. And people will always follow this. And I know it seems it's almost kind of trite in a way to say, produce great content, but that's really it. You can't put a lipstick on a pig and hope that it's going to look good.
Fair enough. And so when push comes to shove, it's about the great content, and actually
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter how all singing, all dancing.
Absolutely, yeah. People don't come to us because we have a kind of a fancy UX. They come to that's a hygiene factor, but they come to us for the content.
Alan, thanks very much for the moment. You mentioned The Guardian. Shubhajit Banerjee is the mobile editor of The Guardian. You were the mobile editor from 2011. I think you were the first mobile editor.
That's right.
At Guardian News and Media. Remind us what the mobile proposition is from The Guardian. What are you offering people?
What we're offering is, and like Alan said, we're also catering to the audiences, not just certain segments. And we want to be where the audience is. So, for instance, I've got a slide. If
you have got a slide, and I'm going to press this button, and hopefully the slide.
So this is just some numbers I pulled from our internal tool, which gives us a sense of.
Okay, it's pretty busy, so you might want to walk us gently through through the numbers.
So just the one to focus on is the pie chart on the right, and this is our traffic breakdown from last Saturday. So when I joined about 3.5 years ago, the non-desktop share would have been something like 10 to 15%. And as you can see, now we average around 60% on the weekends.
So this is weekend traffic. So 60% of that traffic is non-desktop.
60% of the Guardian's page views on weekends is non-desktop. And you can see the phone browser, app, and tablet browsers split there.
Okay. So just for people at the back who might be struggling to see this, I know there's some screens around here, but that big blue block, which is about 40%, is desktop. Then we've got phone, which is people accessing your website via
the phone browser, yeah.
People accessing your website via tablet, which are chunky numbers there.
Yeah.
And then it's the lime green is Android app, and then the blue is the iPhone app.
That's right.
Okay. Just before you explain all the other numbers there, I'm kind of interested in these numbers because actually the app, so people are using mobile phones, but they're using mobile phones to go straight to a website. They're not using it in as many numbers as they are to go to the app.
So that's what sort of I was coming to. We see our traffic divided in the links that you follow from social, from Facebook and Twitter. Those come into the website, and a lot of that is, if Facebook is tremendously mobile heavy, it's obvious that a lot of that traffic will be mobile heavy as well. So we see a lot of that traffic coming to the mobile website. At the same time, we've got this captive audience in the apps. They behave slightly differently. Incidentally, the apps generate 20% of the Guardian's overall page views. And that's a slightly different audience. Same for tablets. You browse at certain, and we've got another slide that shows the day parting. So we're, just like Alan, we're trying to be where the audience is. If you're coming to us in the morning on your mobile phone and you're browsing and you're trying to snack and you're trying to skim through the headlines and sort of catch up on what's happened overnight, we're trying to make that journey really easy and fulfilling for you. The same way, if you're on your desktop and you're on the lunch break, we're trying to ensure that we've got the right kind of content for you. And again, when you see that spike at night for tablet.
Just to go back to that number, you said 20% of your page views to The Guardian are through the apps.
That's right.
Do you think it would be a bigger number if you were, like Alan, behind a paywall?
I very much doubt it. As you would know, that we're very big on open, and we think the largest audience we can reach just helps us in, and you mentioned Snowden, and there are a number of other examples as well, where we've seen the buzz that's created around Guardian content that comes from outside. Snowden was completely done from, not completely, a big chunk of it was done from New York. It's not just UK-centric. If we put anything behind the paywall, I think we lose out on that.
I
amazing
understand, and this
opportunity.
is not the arena to get into discussion about paywall versus non-paywall, but I just wonder that if you were, hypothetically, you were behind a paywall, whether that app number would be bigger.
I would imagine so, where, as I said, apps is slightly different, where you've got this very captive audience who you can serve a great mix of your curated content, and you know a lot more about them because they're not that fleeting.
Okay.
And you can serve up lots of personalization, something that we're looking into. But at the same time, there's a lot of, there are a few challenges around apps. And
Right.
one major challenge, I think, is to stand out, to be noticed by the users. There are a number of studies which show that users are increasingly downloading less apps, and they're not even opening the ones that they've downloaded. And they're probably going back to just 2 or 3. So how do you, especially for us, it's still all right, but how does a new organization which has got a new app?
And this feels like a big question to me, and maybe it's sacrilege to say it, but if the bulk of the people that are coming via tablets and phones are going to a website, and the app is incredibly expensive to produce, and it needs to be updated constantly because the operating systems from Apple and from Google are changing all the time, the form factors of the devices are changing all the time, actually that's a lot of money to spend on something where only 1 in 5 people are going to.
Yes, which is why we're also exploring if, to an extent it already is, the apps can be your graduation products, by which I mean a lot of, for your regular users who are coming to you once a day, a couple of times a day, it might make sense to upsell your apps to them, to say, I see you're a regular reader, you obviously love us, why not download the app where you get much more. And personalization is key in that. Some of the personalization features we're doing in our apps, like follow, where you can follow a topic or a contributor. Breaking news alerts, that's making a huge difference, where The Guardian will tell you if something's worth knowing, whether it's night or day, that kind of stuff. So I think apps definitely have a role to play in that. It's entirely what your audience is and what you want to do with them.
Great, thank you. Anything else you want to tell us from these from this chart
I
here?
just quickly wanted to show you another one, which is the day parting, and again, the change that's happened. So on the left, if you see,
So over
that's
here,
on the left, yes,
Yeah.
2010, that's The Guardian's visits by hour.
Okay.
And on the right, it's 2014, the same thing. And as you can see on the left, the blue line is desktop, and the bits underneath is green and orange, tablet and mobile, not much happening. But in 2014, this is the journey we've made, the distance we've covered. And the same thing underneath, the 2 graphs underneath are the comparisons by share of visits by hour by platform. And those were the spike that I was
so
talking
the
about.
desktop numbers are more than holding up, but it's the increase of these other.
Absolutely. And also, if you see, it's slightly spiky by our over there. And the bottom right, the share one, you can see the very distinct sort of patterns that mobile and tablet are taking.
Right.
The other thing we're noticing.
So sorry to interrupt. So this the top one here is absolute visits by hour, and this is the share of the audience.
Share of traffic.
Gotcha.
And the other thing we're noticing increasingly is that for mobile, earlier we'd get very distinctive spikes, but if you follow the red line, which is mobile, you see now that it's sort of gradually, it keeps climbing. After the morning spike, it sort of keeps climbing. And that I think is quite logical as well, given this is a device that's with you all the time. The screens are getting slightly bigger, the whole tablet phenomenon. And you're using tablets for not a lot of things now. It's sort of reading editions, consuming a lot of video. But this is the device that's with you all the time, and you're consuming content, social media, everything on it.
Okay.
I just wanted to also share this slide,
Another
which
slide.
is sort of the new challenges that we're facing. So on the left is The Guardian on Google Glass, and on the right, it's The Guardian on a smartwatch. So what we're also trying to do is kind of explore and try to understand what the challenges are of these platforms. What is journalism on a smartwatch, on something like this? What's journalism on a smart fridge? Or the next
And
thing that comes
what
up?
conclusions have you come to?
The answer is we don't know. So that is, and that was sort of my message to everyone as well, that if anyone says that they've got the answers, I don't think they're absolutely right. So no one has the answers. We're all experimenting. We're all trying to find out. And as long as you do that, I think there's a lot of, and sort of learn from those experiments, I think there's a lot of
Give me a sense of what you think. What's your personal view about smartwatches and
So I
Google
think
Glass?
what we have at the moment, something like this. This is the Moto 360, and that's Samsung Gear Live. When Apple Watch launches in next year, I think we're still getting a very basic glimpse of wearables. I personally think wearables will be quite big, but who knows? I mean, what form it will take? It might just be a shape of a band-aid here that controls your music, gives you your heart rate, beams videos directly to your head. Who knows?
Great stuff. And again, we'll talk some more in a minute, but I want to talk to Martin Ashplant, who is Digital and Social Media Director at CityM. And we're going to talk to you about Metro as well, because you were, until I think March time this year, you were head of digital at Metro. So we've got some slides here too. So maybe Martin, if I put the slide on and you can talk to it.
Yep.
And if you just tell me where to stop. So
it's a bit of a build. So just get
it all up.
So I started off at Metro in early 2008 when I came in as mobile editor there, and it was quite interesting. At that point, 2008 was when mobile was the next big thing, but no one really knew what they were doing. It seemed anyway. So the idea of what a mobile editor did then was just tick the mobile box. And it was very noticeable that nothing really happened. Although there was this sense that mobile was going to become where all publishers needed to be, it didn't really happen. And I think it was only in sort of 2012, I think, where we started to see the shift in terms of the user behavior onto mobile. And from Metro's point of view, the experience that people had on a mobile looking at the website was frankly appalling. So I've listed a few of the awful things that were going on the website if anyone happened to land on it through a mobile. Essentially, we had a desktop experience that if you ended up on mobile, you were lucky if you could get anything. We had ads that got in the way. We had content that didn't work. We had a separate domain, which was the metro.mobi domain, but we also had a digital app. It was very confusing from the user.
And you knew it didn't work because people were landing and then just disappearing pretty much straight away.
Yeah, the page views per visit was horrendous, and the dwell time was horrendous as well. So we knew this was happening. I mean, you just had to do it as well yourself from a kind of personal experience to know that this was not a user experience that was particularly useful. So we kind of made the call to make a wholesale change in the way that the site was done. We moved over from what we had at the time, which was an internally built CMS, which was tethered to, I think it was Firefox 4.01 was the only version you could use on it. You had to be in the High Street Kensington office. You had to have a 23-inch screen. It was fairly strict in terms of how you could actually get any content on the site. So we moved from that, we moved to WordPress, and we did a big migration to WordPress VIP. We created a responsively designed site, and throughout the whole process, through our head of development, who was very focused on this, it was mobile first. You know, we built it in mobile and then scaled it up to tablet and scaled it up to desktop, which was a complete change in the way that we were all thinking from a development point of view and from a content point of view. So we actually, I think it was December the 6th we put that out.
So this is an HTML5 responsive.
Yeah. So I think there were 5 different sizes that it responded to. So we had desktop, we had tablet portrait, tablet landscape, mobile portrait, mobile landscape. So those were the designs that it was built for.
So tell us the happy ending then.
So the happy ending is, well, I mean, we knew this was working when the page views per visit on mobile browsers went up 50% within, I think it was a week or so. So we saw the change immediately. And then I'll just move it over to the next one.
Sure.
Or turn it off completely.
I think we're going to go in a minute. Here we go.
So we expected, unfortunately, we managed the expectations internally a fair bit. We expected to tank in terms of our traffic for a few months afterwards, and we absolutely did that. The Guardian, thankfully, went and told everyone how bad our traffic was after our much vaunted mobile redesign. But you can see there, I think it was April 2013. So what's that? About 3 or 4 months after our redesign. We clawed back our readers, which was, I guess, grudging respect from the Guardian on that front. And then by a year later, so by kind of April, May time this year, we saw huge growth on the mobile side of things. So the stat that we've used everywhere we can is that we grew 350% year on year in terms of our traffic, and I think that Press Gazette kindly said that that was the fastest growing UK newspaper website at the time, which is definitely on everyone's LinkedIn profiles now, I think. And it was all mobile. You know, all the growth was coming from mobile.
All the growth was coming from mobile?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's in the Press Gazette, so it must be true.
It must be true.
And I feel obliged, because we're at News UK, to ask this question, which I think is a reasonable one. That's all very well, but there needs to be something commercial underneath it.
Yep.
This is all given away for free.
Yeah.
So what was the commercial proposition? What was the commercial upside of doing all this?
So the commercial proposition is an evolving one, I'd say. I have had many discussions when people from a sales team go, can you not just get me some more desktop, please? Because that's what we can sell. And that's the reality of the situation. When they're going to agencies, it's easier to sell UK desktop.
Again, this is not really the focus of today, but just very briefly, why do you think that is? Is that because people are they understand how to sell print, they understand how to sell display advertising, they don't understand how to sell MPUs? And
I think it's, I was listening to Will Hayward at BuzzFeed earlier today, and he was saying that it's primarily because we're all lazy. And I'm inclined to agree with him, because display ads are the easy option to sell. And I say easy, this isn't being dismissive, because at a scalable level, if you've got display inventory, so you've got a whole bunch of MPUs and leaderboards, then you sell them at bulk, and you know how it works, you understand the metrics that come back. So to try and introduce something new like we did, which was, I say new, we weren't the only ones doing it, but the native in-stream content, native ads, which work whether you're on a mobile or on a tablet or whether you're on a desktop. So the commercial proposition that we went with and that we're carrying on with at City AM now is that it's a focus on native and in-stream.
so native advertising, this is content written by your commercial partners, presumably labeled as such.
So it's a mixture of native content, which, yes, is very clearly labeled as native sponsored content, and I think it's really important that we do that. And fortunately, Google forces our hand a little bit, because you have to be very transparent with Google whenever you've been paid for producing content. But also in terms of native ads. So rather than having the banners and buttons on the left-hand side or on the sidebar, the idea that you can have adverts that link out to other sites within the stream of content. Facebook are doing it, Twitter are doing it. That's how users are used to experiencing content. And I think that's, for me personally, that's got to be the focus for what we do.
Okay, let's talk about your current roles.
Yep.
So you started there in May.
In May.
So maybe you haven't got everything done that you want to do, but let's talk about it. And I think there's another slide. So City AM.
Yeah, so City AM, up until the beginning of the year, I think the digital side of City AM was, it's fair to say it wasn't a focus. There was a website, but there wasn't an awful lot of attention paid to it. There was a view that, the opportunity was definitely there, but they would have to make a significant investment to try and compete with some of the big players out there, the FTs, etc. But that's all changed at the beginning of the year. So I've come in and am in the process of putting together a team from a content point of view and a dev point of view, with a very, very firmly focused digital objective to grow audience and to grow revenue. So we've done it. I mean, I'm basically hoping that everything that worked at Metro works again. So we've gone through a similar sort of process, which is a responsively redesigned site. A big thing from a content point of view and a publishing point of view is actually making everyone work 7 days, which sounds obvious when you think about it, but a lot of newspapers is not set up in that way, and actually turning it around. And it was really interesting seeing the chart from The Guardian in terms of the mobile traffic going up in the evening. We actually, at Metro, we saw it even more so, to the point that our entire traffic was higher at 9 o'clock at night than it was at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, or lunchtime peaks in the day.
So that move from 5 days to 7 days is completely a reflection of the fact that because of mobile, they're there at the weekends in a way that they weren't before.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, so our focus at the moment, and this is a challenge, and I don't think anyone's got this right yet, in terms of how can you make sure that everything works on mobile? Because that's sort of at the forefront of our mind all the time. But when you're doing data visualizations, which we're trying to do a lot of in data journalism, how do you make that work on mobile? How do you make it instinctively obvious what you're talking about? I'm really interested what AMPT have been doing from Trinity Mirror. They've started to work really hard on that, but it's a challenge, and I think that's one that is still to be overcome. But I think just making sure that the load speed is really, really quick, because people don't hang around on mobile, that all of your content and all of your ads and everything that appears on mobile works within that environment.
Okay, and just for those that can't see them, so you had a desktop and mobile split in January of 66 to 33%. and in most recent figures it's sort of a 55, 45 almost, or
Yeah.
56,
And
44.
It's going up already, I think. So I think it won't be long before it's 50-50. And having seen what it was like at Metro when it was sometimes 65% was mobile, certainly on weekends it was up towards 70. I expect that to keep growing for pretty much every publisher in the world.
And I suspect there's some nodding heads out there in terms of people's own experience. Just a final question before we move it on. What about apps for City AM? Are you building an app?
So I've been involved in what we call the Edition app at Metro, which was, personally, I think it's a brilliant product. It's kind of a stylized newspaper feel app that has won awards and has got a really good team working on it.
So it's a replica of the newspaper.
Well, it isn't a replica. It's they use the print content, but I think there was a team of about 10 people who would take the print content and they would turn it into something that worked natively on an app environment, add HTML5 functionality, make it do interesting bells and whistles things, and it was great, but it was very, very resource heavy.
Right.
Really expensive to run. You need a lot of manpower, and there was a lot of heavy shift work that needed to be done to get it onto that point. So having seen how that has worked and having seen the limitations in terms of the audience growth that was there, no matter what we did, no matter how good the app was, we couldn't really get above a certain ceiling in terms of our daily audience numbers. It was there or thereabouts. There was no sense of the graph going like that, like it was on the website. So knowing that, as I do, my view, working in a very lean team where resources aren't aplenty, is that for us at City AM, the best situation at the moment is to have a PDF reader-esque app, which is an exact replica of the newspaper, which fulfills the requirement of people who want to read the newspaper, but allows us to focus on what we really want to be doing, which is the responsibly designed site.
And a mobile app in the way that these guys have got no mobile app, that's a luxury for you guys.
It's something that we couldn't do. We would have to focus on the making sure that our site worked on a mobile first.
Mike, thanks very much. I want to take some questions from you. Can I get a sense if there are any questions? I'm rather hoping there might be some questions. There's a question there, which is very good. I don't know if we've got a mic. I'm kind of looking to see if we've got a microphone out there. If we haven't, would you mind speaking rather loudly? So So do people consume websites differently from different devices at different times of day?
We do, to an extent, we do, where, as I mentioned, in the morning when it's usually we see a commuter audience, and that's very different, where you're probably hanging from something and trying to get through life. So you see that going through things and looking for something. There's a lot of catch up, which we already see from early morning, right from when you wake up. So when we do user testing, something that often comes up is when I wake up in the morning, I go straight to Twitter or something like that. And it's almost this insecurity that you want to catch up and you're feeling left out about something's happened over the last 8 hours while I was sleeping. So you get that spike of people looking for things to read and trying to catch up. And as I said again, during lunchtime, you have, or sort of towards lunchtime, you have that whole, I've got a bit more time, I'm on my break, I'm munching on my sandwich. I've got some time to look at slightly more in-depth stuff. Again, the same thing you see in the evening or before bedtime, where you want to catch up on the day and what's happened, just a final quick look at the world around you and off to bed.
Thanks. Alan?
Yeah, I think what Sujit was saying about different times of the day is key. And the real challenge is to design products that reflect those different types of behavior, because your behavior when you check your mobile first thing in the morning is going to be different from how you're checking things at lunchtime and how you may be reading in the evening. And the trick is to design products that kind of match those behaviors. And also, I think that I think it's a shibboleth that people just snack on mobile phones. I think kind of I may tell a story about my mother-in-law, and without getting too into Les Dawson territory, this weekend I noticed she was at my house and she was reading her mobile phone. And I was saying, what are you doing? And she was reading a novel on her phone. And I'm sure kind of many people here have read books on their phones now. And with screens getting bigger, I think behavior is changing. And I said, well, why aren't you reading you've got your iPad upstairs, why are you doing that? She said, well, it's upstairs. It's what's convenient at that time. And so your apps or websites have to be ready to match those reader behaviors.
And do you have evidence that people are switching from newspaper to tablet on the same day?
Well, obviously that's very difficult to measure in
Yeah.
terms of the newspaper side of it, but our survey suggests that yes, people do read more than one device or use more than one device. It's what comes to hand. I mean, I read the tablet this morning and I was having a look at my phone as I came up in the lift.
Sorry, just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that people only snack on mobile. They absolutely read longer form as well, as Alan said. And that's going back to my earlier point that if that's the device that you have with you all the time, and the screens are slightly getting bigger, etc. And we know that lots of people read books now. So I wasn't suggesting that people only slack, but it's definitely, there are certain kinds of consumption at certain times of day.
Thanks. Mike, a thought on different consumption habits according to different devices and maybe how that informs what you do when?
I think a lot of it is about the content that you produce. And one of the things that we noticed at Metro very, very clearly was the fact that in the evenings, TV is a big, big driver of content that people want to read online. So whether it's a big TV show like X Factor, or whether it's something that's fairly topical, like something that's on one of the news programs, that would then drive people to almost to validate what they've just seen.
Are they dual screening? Are they?
Absolutely, yeah. So we were seeing that happen in real time. So something was on TV, you suddenly see the traffic from search for a particular person or for a particular piece of content go through the roof. So what we were trying to do was we're trying to make sure we were preempting some of those things. So producing content, almost like explainer pieces about things that you know people will be interested in, so that it's out there at the time when they're most interested in. Because if you then start trying to produce the content after this has happened, you've missed the boat. So it's almost about thinking based on what's going on, whether it's a live event or whether it's something that's on TV is going to happen, how can you put content in that's going to help give people a richer experience?
There's a Swedish newspaper called Aftonbladet who, whenever Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's a national hero, plays football in any kind of match, at half time they put out an article about him. Doesn't matter what it's about,
because
it gets read because they know that people will come back and read about him at half time.
Do you think that's a business model that will work? We've got some more questions out here. There's a question here. Are there any other questions? So what we'll do is we'll take 3 at a time in that case. If you just introduce yourself and speak quite loudly, please.
My name is Beatrice Cross from the University of East London. I'm a student of journalism. It's obvious that not everyone has tablets or knows how to use computers and tablets. Do you think that the increase in the use of tablets or computers, the increase in the knowledge, would somehow, as time goes on, affect the print media? Since most people, like I do, most times tune into my mobile phone, my iPad or my iPhone to read the news. If everyone have that access, do you think there's a challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. So there's still some people that aren't quite there yet in terms of having these devices. Let's take a couple more questions. Gentleman there, I think his name might be Carl.
Based on the experience but based on your experience with mobile content, what are the characteristics of content? And I'm thinking about treatment rather than topics. So is it more mobile? Is it more video, visual, maybe data-driven content? What are the characteristics of content that seems to work particularly well when it's delivered to a mobile device?
Thanks very much. Good question. And the lady down here, you might want to just wait for the mic. Just introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Corinne Podger, Thomson Reuters Foundation. It was fascinating to see the breakdown according to devices and times of day. What I'm interested in too, is a question across the panel, is whether you've collected data around how people are varying across age groups, particularly digital natives, so-called, in the way that they are consuming newspaper products.
Thank you very much. So we had a question about people still without, and as that audience grows, people getting...
Across devices, I'm not talking about paper, but just age groups across...
Understood. So that question about age groups, question that might be connected, may not, but people who are still without And then there was a question from Carl at the back about treatments of content, not subject matters, but treatments of content which work best. So if you could take those 3 questions and we'll go across the panel. Alan, choose which one you want to take first.
So in terms of treatment of stories, I mean, I think our general view is that people will read stories if they're good enough, however long they are on mobile. But it's clear that video works well. People instinctively are used to looking at video on mobile devices, and that is a very good hook for people. And we found with our sports app that people like watching videos as part of their mobile experience, and also in the tablet app as well, which will count as mobile for this case. People love what we call internally the Harry Potter experience of having a match report and then a video which shows the events that are described. So I think video is absolutely key to a very simple answer.
And age groups?
In terms of age groups, the tablet is the one we've kind of been mostly focused on. It is a younger demographic than newsprint, unsurprisingly. As for how they read it, I think we have an edition-based product. People read it very similarly to the way they read a newspaper, as far as we know, because obviously the newspaper is then self-certifying.
And what about this final question about, or the first question about a growing audience, how that might impact journalism or newspapers?
A growing audience, was it a growing audience or a shrinking audience for newspapers, I thought?
Well, a growing audience of people getting their heads around how to use tablet devices and mobile phones. I'm getting a nod from over there. So,
which is great. We think the more places people can access our content, the better.
Thanks, Alan. Mike.
So it's
Martin.
I think taking the first question in terms of the type of the type of content that's put out, I think what I would say is it's the intrinsic link between social that works on mobile. What we're finding is that so much social activity happens on mobile, well above what we were seeing on desktop and tablet. So it's about producing something that works on social, whether that be a kind of catchy headline, or whether that be a very strong image, or whether it be what we're doing at the moment, a piece of data that captures something. It's about already thinking why someone will share that.
And what someone would share as a City AM reader is presumably very different from what they'd share as a Metro reader.
Absolutely, but I'll tell you what's been really interesting is the psychology behind it is exactly the same. So why people share, it doesn't matter if you're reading BuzzFeed or you're reading Vice or you're reading City AM or you're reading FT. You're sharing because this is my interpretation of it. I'm sure there's psychologists who probably have a much better view on it, but it feels like people are sharing because they want it to showcase something about themselves. So whether that is because they think it will make them look funny, whether it will make them look more intelligent, whether it will make them look more in the know, if you can find what that thing is and you can produce something that helps them do that, then it just seems to work each time.
Thanks very much.
So not much to add to what these guys said. It's very much, as you said, social, and and I think you made the point earlier on that if it's a great story, people will read it. So there's it's not that if it's a slightly longer piece, they won't. It's a fantastic story, they'd want to read it, they'd want to share it, and want to consume it. In terms of formats, I think we don't experiment enough, and I think it's time slightly to move away from only text articles. A lot of stories can just be told in pictures, or lots of pictures and a bit of caption. So I remember there was someone resigned, and she tweeted it. One of the ministers resigned, and she tweeted it. That's all you need. You just need the tweet and a bit of context around it.
And we don't need to worry about search engines anymore in terms of it being found.
I think that's improving, or that's changing a bit as well. Every time we talk to Google, we try to emphasize, and I think they realize absolutely that it's not just about 200 words or whatever it was, but it's about one image. So when Obama was inaugurated, I remember there was this one picture that was being shared everywhere. Anyone who, you didn't even have to write a line around it, you just shared that image.
Sure. And this question about age, demographics.
Age, without going into specific numbers, what we see is newspapers are sort of the older group, and I think our Kindle audience is the oldest group. And what we see is our mobile website, the youngest. But I think we're all struggling with reaching out to the really young people who I keep hearing about Vice, and I think they're doing a lot of experiments at least. So it's absolutely a challenge in sort of getting to the young people. And again, I don't have answers, but we should experiment.
Thanks very much. Let's take one more round of questions. The lady at the back there, please, if you wouldn't mind waiting for the mic.
Yes, Marianne Seacard. You talked about having to be very transparent with Google about native content. Could you please expand on that? I mean, tell us what Google's rules are and what they demand and how they punish you if you're not transparent.
Thanks very much. Other questions? Who else had their hand up? Let's go back over here. Sorry, I'm making you... Oh, there's another mic. That's good.
Eba Logba from the University of East London. My question is more about the impact of all of this digitization. That is all the evidence that you supply that this is ongoing and the numbers are rising. But are you in any way convinced that the fundamental issue about the public sphere and whether as a result of this increased consumption of digital news, that the quality of debate is better? Are we benefiting as a democratic society from all of this?
Thank you very much. And there was a lady just there, please.
Abigail Fryman-Rauch from The Tablet. Great name for paper in this digital age. Established 1840 though. So as a specialist paper, we are working on with very limited resources, and Martin touched on this really, but what should we be prioritising to enhance our digital presence as much as possible when you've got quite a limited budget and you're trying to punch above your weight?
Thank you very much. So what should you be prioritising? You've got the name, which is pretty good. We'll start at this end of the panel this time. So a question about priorities when the budget is limited. There was a question about the impact on the quality of the debate and what it's doing for our democracy. And I'll leave the Google question, unless you have answers on the Google and native advertising
I want to
question.
actually pick up the prioritizing
Please.
point. What I'd say is you should look at what your audience is and where it's going. So I'd say if you haven't already, invest in better analytics, bring in your users, ask them what they're looking at, what they want from you, and then focus on those areas. So it will be very different from the challenges you'd have or the opportunities you'd have, be very different from the ones we have and even Alan has. So my suggestion would be that bring in your audience, start something and then test it a lot, learn from those and then build more. What was the second question?
There was a question about the quality of the debate and how this impacts the digitization of news, how it impacts
the quality of the content.
Well, how it impacts the quality of the general debate, how it affects our democracy. Big question, I know. With 5 minutes to go. Okay. Nicely done.
Yeah,
and actually, Martin, you might want to start with the Google question.
That
Gives you a bit of time to think about
I'll think about democracy while I talk about Google. So in terms of that, Google are very, very clear in their terms and conditions that if you are commercially benefiting from producing content, then you need to be transparent. You need to tell them and you need to tell the reader that. Now, this came to a fore in a couple of years ago now with a certain newspaper, which I won't mention the name just in case there's anyone in the room from there, and a few organisations such as Interflora were one of them who got penalised by Google for essentially selling links, because as anyone who's ever had looked into SEO knows, if the more links you have, the better Google juice you get. So what some organisations were doing was selling the ability to add links to their content so that whoever had that link was going to get a benefit from the Google point of view. So Google clamped down on this. They made it they went public, which is quite unusual for them, and talked about a few instances where they had penalised people for doing that. So as a result of that, I take that to impact quite heavily in terms of native advertising, in that you have to be clear and you have to tell users and you have to tell Google when you are financially benefiting from producing content.
And how do you tell Google?
So you tell Google by not putting it into your, I'm getting technical here, so stay with me if you can.
Just briefly.
Yeah, so by not putting it into your Google News sitemap. So essentially not telling Google this is news. And also by making sure that none of the links are able to get any SEO juice. And also by just saying sponsored content. You know, they actually explicitly say that. Be clear and say this is sponsored content.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong, there's a whole murky world as to, print content. Was it sponsored content? Did you get a freebie to do it? Do you get paid for it in kind? These are all questions, but I think when it's very cut and dry, when someone pays you to produce content, then be transparent.
Okay, question about democracy there, and there's also the question from the tablet about limited budget, what do you prioritise?
Yeah, so the democracy one, again, I think there's probably an entire debate to be had on that. But what I think I would say is that we shouldn't assume that because people are snacking and talking in kind of micro conversations on Twitter or sharing conversations that the debate is any less worthwhile. And actually what I found incredibly interesting was around the Scottish referendum was that the conversations that were going on, I think were reaching far more people because of what we've got available in terms of the ability to share information through digital and share information through mobile.
Thank you very much.
And in terms of prioritization, for me, responsive design is the answer to a number of prayers because it means that you can produce a website and worry about the website. And then as long as you've done it right in the first place, you know that people are going to get a decent experience. My preference would always be focused on mobile because that's where the growth is. That is where the audience is going to increase in the next few years. So if you're going to focus on one area, focus on that smartphone.
Thank you, Alan.
So yes, to take that last point in terms of the tablet, I mean, I think also a responsive website is clearly the way to go because you will end up producing different feed engines for different kinds of apps and not get a huge amount of return and invest a lot in that. But a responsive website will be good for you everywhere. And also I'd say make sure you get the right CMS and that you're not developing lots of different CMSs for different areas. Because I mean, as a journalist, this is something I only discovered kind of relatively recently, but my goodness me, different CMSs can cause you a lot of problems. So if you sort that out, that's the best thing to do. And in terms of democracy, I think if you give people information, you have to trust them to use it well. And Mike Darcy was talking earlier about the Telegraph's MP's expenses campaign, I guess. And the people took that and they kicked out some MPs and they kept other MPs. So I think they made the right decision on that. And in terms of, we've seen on the Sunday Times, we did a campaign about the NHS to get the weekend, to cut down the number of people dying in hospitals at the weekend through lack of care. And because we were able to mobilize thousands of people online, we were able to effectively change government policy. So I think that's a testament to the power that, individual groups, whether it's a newspaper or a press or whomsoever, have in a new digital world.
Alan, thank you very much. We are out of time. Apologies for those I didn't get round to ask the questions. I guess the lesson is get your hand up nice and early, but please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you, John. Expertly moderated. Brilliant. So we've got a 15-minute break now. If everyone wants to go back around the corner, grab a cup of tea or coffee and see what other delights News UK have laid on for us. And we're going to return at 20 to 4 for the last two round tables. 2-minute warning. Have I switched on? Hello. If I could give everyone a 2-minute warning, we're about to resume. So 2 minutes, and we'll crack on with the next panel. Right up to, hello? Brilliant. Right, thanks everyone. Take your seats. So I'm going to invite up to the stage the speakers for our second round table. So we've got Push, who is the editor of a tablet-only subscription magazine called Electronic Sound, which is something that we've done some stories about. So you take a pew up there on the end there, Push. We've got Natalie Malinowicz. I got that right? Thank you. She's the mobile editor of a website you may have heard of, which is BBC News Online. And we've also got Luke Lewis, who is the UK editor of BuzzFeed, which is another website I'm sure we've heard of. So what I'm going to start with is give each, I'll let you decide if you want to go up to the podium or if you want to speak from where you are. But this works quite well, doesn't it? It's quite friendly. We'll start with you, Push, on the end there.
Okay.
And really just tell us a little bit about your story, your journey, just to introduce you a bit more. I mean, Press Gazette's covered your magazine, which we're quite keen on because it's
you are.
a paying professional journalist, I think.
We are.
To
astonishing.
Produce a magazine which has got a good paid for readership, and you've got some interesting funding for it as well.
Yeah, we have.
And it's tablet only, but tell us a little bit more about it, how it came about.
Well, it came about, I mean, my background is print journalism. I worked at IPC for many years on the music titles. I worked with Luke's dad, actually, on a couple of things. And the idea for Electronic Sound is a magazine about electronic music, and it's about essentially music made with synthesizers, is the best way to describe it. It's a niche within a specialist sector of music. So our target is really quite small and quite narrowly defined. The original idea for Electronic Sound, we started off actually as a print magazine, as a one-off print magazine with Future in 2012. We put out what we thought was going to be the first issue, and it turned out to be the only issue, because almost as soon as we were out, Future sold all of their music titles, their listening music titles, to a company called Team Rock, as we call them. And Team Rock were not interested in electronic music in the slightest. So we thought about finding another home for it, but instead of that, we kind of thought, well, maybe we could do it ourselves. I say we, it's myself and a guy called Mark Rowland, also ex-IPC, Melody Maker, NME. So we thought about doing it as a PDF, and then we thought that was a bit dull. So we decided to investigate doing it as an app. We launched on a platform called Mag Plus, which some of you may know of. It's quite a lot of magazines out there are done on digital magazines are done on Mag Plus. It's a plugin that works with Adobe InDesign basically, and it also helps you with the back end and feeding through to Apple and to Google and to Amazon. So we launched, the first issue was last April. We've done 8 issues so far. We put out 3 issues very quickly, and then we had a bit of we realized we were going to insane if we tried to keep it up as a monthly. So we knocked it back to being a quarterly, which is what we've been ever since. Basically, our journalists were all buddies of ours from NME and Melody Maker and magazines like that, Mixmag, some of them, Ministry. And we asked them, would they write for us for free? We were sinking our savings into it to get it going. Nobody got paid for the first 7 issues. We're now up to issue 8. We've just got investment come in, 3 lots of investors come in. So we're able to pay people, and we're able to pay ourselves as well, which is, I can't tell you how terrific that is. And we're tiny, we're small. I mean, compared to, all the other guys and girls on the panels today, there are some Chelseas and some Arsenals, and we're kind of Forest Green Rovers. In fact, we're not even Forest Green, we're Forest Green Rovers B team, probably. That's where we are. But actually, thinking about it, our figures aren't that terrible. When I look at things like the NME and their digital edition, and Uncut, which is another magazine that's kind of similar to us in some ways. It deals with rock music, but it's kind of a lot of heritage title, which is we are as well. We deal with a lot of kind of older stuff. It's not just new stuff. They're posting sales of around about, for their digital editions, about 1,500. Currently, we have 5,000 readers. We have a free version as well, which is where, of course, the bulk of them are. But we do have around about getting on for 1,000 subscribers and one-off purchases now, which I don't think it's too bad, actually. And I think what's interesting about kind of our story is we are tiny. We are a startup. We're journalists. That's where we started. That's what we are. We're not marketing people. We're not really particularly business people. We're having to learn that very, very quick, I can tell you. But we've done it for ourselves. And actually, I think what's interesting is that as grassroots, this is where a lot of journalists are working at this kind of level, starting things themselves, whether that be starting blogs themselves or increasingly doing things like we've done. And some of those guys are going to have success. Whether that will be we're one of them, I don't know, but hopefully we will be. But yeah, that's the story of where we're at. So we're on to phase 2 now with a bit of money. We had a marketing budget of £130 for our first 7 issues. That's for the whole of the 7 issues, not per issue. We now have a marketing budget. We have an office. We have a full-time designer. And yeah, we're paying journos. And hopefully the next phase is going to be as much of a trip as the first phase was.
Very good. Glad to hear it. So, I mean, just slightly on the money side, it was quite unusual where you got that funding. Can you tell us a little bit how you got that funding and how much you got in, if you can tell us?
Yeah, no, that's fine. We took part in what was a kind of like a Dragon's Day den organised by UK Trade and Industry. And we had to pitch to a table of investors. I think we had 6 minutes to deliver a pitch. I think there were about 30 different companies pitching that day. As a result of that, we met up with, there were about 15 or 20 investors on the table. And from that, we got interest from something called the Low Carbon Innovation Fund, which is an EU funding body. And they liked us because, for all the obvious reasons, we don't cut down trees, we don't have waste, we don't have to warehouse anything, blah, blah, blah. And through them, we found 2 private investors. So the total amount of investment we've got is 175,000. 2 lots of 50,000 from the private investors and 75,000, which is match funding from the Low Carbon Innovation Fund.
And just slightly on the geeky side, you said Mag Plus.
Yeah.
Is that a platform that costs you a lot of money to use? Is that something anyone can use? And what do you create? Is it something which is like a print magazine, or is it got more bells and whistles?
It's got a lot more bells and whistles. The great thing about it for us is that we can put lots of video and audio in, which for a music magazine is terrific. That's one of the reasons why a PDF is not very exciting for us, because we can't do that. So yeah, it's effectively a plugin. It was developed by an American publisher called Bonnier, and they're a big publisher in America, and they developed for their magazines originally, and then decided to sell it out. Increasingly, like Popular Science are on it. I think you had the guy actually from Aptitude was on at the last News on the Move conference, and they are the licensees in the UK for it. So anybody can use it. It costs us. We pay in dollars, it's $399 a month. Plus we pay a little tiny bit per download. It costs us about 3 or 4 cents for about 5 copies to download of the magazine. We're working hard to get the size down of the download down, because obviously it costs us less money, and also it's quicker for people to download that way. So it's not hugely expensive. It's manageable, I think. You know, that's not too much money. And with that, you also get the back end to be able to get onto Amazon, which we haven't done actually, but Apple was our starting point. We started on iPad. We're now on Android as well, tablet, and we're also now, as from this new issue that's just been out the last couple of days, on phone as well for the first time. So we're looking at expanding. Plus, we've got the PDF for the poor souls that don't have a smartphone or a tablet.
Brilliant. It pushes you out on Android, Apple, PDF, any way people want it.
Basically, yeah. I mean, in terms of our kind of readers, it's about 60% on the PDF, which is a bit of a shame, but I think that's kind of understandable. Apple is dominating by far. We've just launched on Android, so it's impossible to say, but you know, and Apple is the main place, and the iPad is the main place for us. That's where all the bells and whistles work. For our mobile versions, they're very stripped down, because of course people don't want to have, you know, they want to get it downloaded quick and be able to read it at ease.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Sure, we'll come back to you. We'll come over to Manchester United now, or AC Milan, or whatever you like. But anyway, the BBC. Okay. So let's call it what it is, BBC. So, Natalie, tell us a little bit about what the BBC News mobile editor does. So what your kind of journey's been, and a little bit more about what the BBC is doing to, optimise its output to get in this massive kind of growing market.
So my role's a relatively new one. I only started properly as mobile editor in April this year. Okay. And before that, my boss, the editor of the website, said to me, spend some time looking at mobile. Are we doing it right? Have a think about it. And I think it's basically because he saw me in meetings just looking at my phone all the time. So I was clearly the right person. And when we started looking into it, we already had a very big audience on mobile. We hadn't quite reached the tipping point, which we have now, but we had a very big audience. We were very successful. And yet we were kind of thinking, are people consuming stories in the right ways? Is this the right content for them? So the first thing, what we've done is just make sure that our content works. And that's something that's very basic level. The second thing is obviously your mobile audience is looking at mobiles at very different times of day than a desktop audience. So desktop, we always have that 1 o'clock peak, very easy to work towards, quite nice, settle in the morning. With mobile, we are seeing kind of a bump at 6 in the morning kind of to 9, and then it kind of stays steady, and then another bump in the evening. And so basically it's having, the mobile website updated, looking fresh, and having everything people need all day. Basically, the deadline is now all the time. And of course, there were lots of exciting new competitors, like the one sitting next to me. So, all that was kind of great motivation to start looking afresh at our content. So what we started doing, once we sorted out that our content was working, was thinking of particular formats that we thought worked well for mobile audiences. And we looked at text and video separately. So with text, it was kind of about making it scannable, quite modular. We're still using the same CMS, which had some restrictions. So we looked at explainers first. And the thing about explainers, I know it's very fashionable to talk about explainer journalism, but we and everyone else has been doing that forever. I mean, that's what journalism is. So how do you make it more appealing? So we came up with a kind of, which could be quite a traditional format of a Q&A, but we made it quite visual. We made the answers very short and snappy, the questions very basic. So within a minute, you could get a really good idea of what a story was. And so we started developing these. They're very easy to update, and we've had huge success. I was just looking back at the figures for this week, and in the past week, 6 out of 7 days, an Ebola explainer has been in the top 20 for mobile. And so, I think that's working. And then for video, we did something similar, but we thought, okay, we started with, I think it was one of the Korean crises, maybe 18 months ago. Thought actually there must be loads of people out there who have no idea the origins of this crisis, and actually we're sort of a bit hazy on it, some of us. So let's do a really basic explainer, really basic terms. What do you need to know from the Korean War onwards? And that was massively popular. So,
what do you think people are doing? Is someone sitting on the bus somewhere thinking, God, I want to know what Ebola is. What is Ebola? And then they're coming into you via Google, or how does it work?
So they're coming to us either through the front page. We still get quite a lot of homepage traffic, or through social or Google. But I think it is about asking the question that people are asking themselves, and it's finding that precise question and answering that question. And the same, I'd say the same with video. It's about answering that one question that people are asking themselves, and that you probably need to change it as time goes on.
Okay. And just a bit more on the tipping point. That's quite interesting. So I'm pleased you said that, because I said that in my intro, and so that's borne that out. But so when did BBC News Online reach the mobile tipping point, and how does it all balance between mobile and desktop?
So I can't actually remember when we reached the tipping point. We certainly reached it for weekends much earlier than we did for weekdays. So weekends, I'd say it's probably been a year already. The balance is currently about 56% mobile and tablet, and the rest is desktop. And at weekends, we're seeing about 64% mobile and tablet. And that changes dramatically when there's a big breaking story out of office hours. So, whether it's Philip Seymour Hoffman, any celebrity death, any big story, Scottish referendum, we saw about 86% of UK traffic coming to us from mobiles and tablets in the morning.
Okay. And so, so you don't have to worry, so forgive my ignorance here, but we talked a lot about responsive design in the last session. So do you have the BBC website, is that responsive? Or do you have a widget which tells people, you can tell whether someone's looking at it from a mobile and you give them a mobile version?
So we're in a bit of a transition.
Yes.
So our mobile web is responsive, and we're growing it from there up to bigger screens and bigger devices. So we currently have a desktop site, a mobile site. They have the same content, but one of them is responsive, the other one isn't yet.
So how do you know which one you're going to get? Does the
So on mobile, we direct people to the responsive site. They can opt out of it if they want.
Yeah.
But if you go there for the first time, we will give you the responsive site.
and if you're on desktop, you get the
If
desktop?
you're on desktop or tablet, you will get the desktop site.
Okay. And do you have a sense of where it's going? Do you think it will all go to responsive?
It is all going to responsive, yes.
It is. Okay. When's that going to happen? Soon.
Ish.
Okay, we've got a story there. And what about how important are tablets? Apps on the mobile and tablet apps?
So the apps are very important.
Yeah.
I'd say it's about, it varies, but about 13 to 15% of our traffic comes from apps. It's a very loyal audience, and it's an audience that consumes a lot of stories. So they're choosing to come to you. So it is slightly different to mobile web, where people might chance upon you through social or because a friend recommended it.
Okay, look, thanks very much. I'm sure we'll come back to you. Lots of questions and so on. So Luke Lewis, you're going to jazz things up with a bit of a presentation.
Yeah, I've been the only tryhard here who actually made some slides.
But you were slightly on the naughty step because they came at the last minute, but that's good. But we're pleased to have them.
Let's have a look,
So
see if they work.
Here we go.
So at these sort of conferences, people often talk about the tipping point. At what point do publishers get more than 50% of their traffic via mobile devices? For us, I mean, that's quite a long time ago now. That actually happened in the summer 2013. And so I think we were ahead of the curve on that. I think most publishers are starting to find, we're not that unusual now in it being more of a like 60-40 split towards mobile. But the difference is when we have a huge breakout, like viral hit post, it skews way, way, way towards 90% plus. It becomes incredibly significant. And the thing is, there was a time, if you're in the business of trying to create articles that went viral, there was a time when mobile devices were a barrier to that because people would be at work, they'd be sharing articles on desktop, then they'd go home, someone would send it to them and it wouldn't work on their phone. Now we're finding that smartphones are completely the engine of virality. You can't have a huge hit post on BuzzFeed without mobile devices. So, and yeah, it's really changed how we think of what we do. It's quite a recent shift in usage patterns throughout the day. Traditionally, journalists would get in about 9 or 10 in the morning, and you'd start to see your traffic peak at lunchtime because everyone was at their office on desktop. And nowadays, I think this pattern, I'm sure, will repeat in newsrooms everywhere, is that our traffic peaks quite late in the day. It starts to pick up around 6 p.m. and it tends to peak pretty late, 10 p.m., because people are reading BuzzFeed posts on their phones in front of the TV and on their way home. So it has really changed the game for us. And the kind of posts that do well on mobile, it's basically impossible now to have a genuinely massive breakout post on desktop only. So if you look at these two graphs, one of these posts was 67% mobile. One of them was 60% desktop. And I'm sure you can predict which is the one that was massively more successful.
Can I just ask what counts as mega viral for you, and how many hits would it need to get?
Well, it's not all about page views, because you could have something that did 200,000 views, but if all those views came via the homepage, we don't really count it as a hit because we want the sort of social lift above that. So this doesn't seem to be working, which is really annoying. Okay, that's died. So obviously, it's smartphones that are the engine of the viral distribution. And the interesting thing about that is that people assume that what do people like to consume on smartphone? It's going to be short form content. And that's why BuzzFeed Post works, because they're quite listy, they're quite bite-sized, they're quite accessible. Actually, we're finding that is not the case. And you can some of the biggest hits we've had actually have been the long form stuff. So there was a post that the investigative team in New York did recently by a guy called Alex Campbell, which was Beaten, Bereaved, and Behind Bars. That's done well over 1 million views. Over 50% of that was mobile. And it's really not about tablet. Tablet is not significant for us. So in fact, you can see where people drop out of these very long articles. And the time on page was far longer. It was something like an average of 20 minutes on smartphone. On tablet, it was only about 12 minutes. So it kind of gives the lie to the idea that smartphones are just for snackable, bite-sized content.
You get, and does that sort of mobile audience inform the way you present it and the way you write it, and how do you kind of feed
Yeah,
that into
absolutely.
journalism?
One of the slides I was going to show you was, if you look at our content management system, it's actually built into it, the mobile preview. So I think within the organization, you really need to drill into writers that what they write has to work on smartphone, because it's the majority of the views are going to come that way. And so if you create, as a writer on BuzzFeed, if you create a post, you can see the mobile preview right there in the right-hand rail, which really kind of focuses your thinking on it. That's one of the reasons why we use a lot of images. We use a lot of clear, bold subheads, because it looks great on a small screen. We've also got a nice bit of tech which enables you to text the article before it's been published. You can text it to your own device, so you know how it looks on that exact device.
And I guess we almost needn't say it, but the BuzzFeed homepage is completely responsive, am I right? So is it, or is that the wrong way to put it?
It is, but it's kind of not so much a big deal for us, because we don't have a right rail with loads of sort of clutter, which other publishers do, because we don't have display advertising. So the articles fill the screen, so it doesn't actually matter to us, the responsive thing.
That's something that just was a happy sort of happenstance.
Yeah, and actually the shift towards mobile usage has been huge for the commercial side, and that was just a happy accident, because we don't do display advertising, because when you shrink it down from desktop to mobile, a display ad or an MP or a banner, it's pretty awful. You can't read it, you can't click on it. With the kind of advertising that we do, which is a sponsored article, it's the exact same format as an editorial post, and it works brilliantly on mobile. People read it and share it and enjoy it in the exact same way as they would an editorial article.
Because a lot of other publishers have copied that kind of a tile thing, haven't they, where you can shrink it easily and you get stories coming down one after the other on your mobile easily. So I mean, just finally, which is the really important thing, really, is great to get this mobile audience, but unless we make some money out of it, it's not going to get us anywhere. So BuzzFeed's got a very clear business model. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How you make money out of the mobile readers?
Yeah, same way we make money out of desktop readers is that a lot of publishers are struggling now with a sort of a shift away from display advertising, and the yields just go down and down towards native advertising. We never really had to wrestle with that internally, because there never was any display advertising on BuzzFeed to get rid of. So we never sort of got hooked on that. Once you're on that kind of CPM business model, it's quite hard to get off it. So yeah, it's just a happy accident, is that the kind of advertising we do works brilliantly on mobile.
Doesn't matter what device you're reading it on, as long as you're reading it.
Because the kind of advertising, as I say, it's just sponsored articles. They're often numbered lists. They're often very visual. They're modeled very closely on the editorial stuff we do.
And final point on the native stuff, which Martin Ashplant mentioned earlier on, which I didn't realize at all, but apparently Google will put you on the naughty step if you're not clear about something native. So what are the hoops you have to go through to make sure you're not going to get either naughty step by Google or reported to the ASA for?
Yeah. I mean, it's just illegal, isn't it? I mean, so you have to be incredibly transparent about it. I mean, if you just look at BuzzFeed.com on your phone now, you'll see that the first two articles are editorial. The third will be a sponsored one. It's got a different color. It's got, if you click through to it, it has the brand name right there on the top left. And it's completely clear and transparent. I think a lot of publishers in the rush to embrace native advertising, they're playing pretty fast and loose with the division between editorial and commercial, which is a bit dodgy.
Yeah, I agree there, very dodgy. And I mean, and Martin was saying that basically you even have to make sure it doesn't appear on your Google News sitemap. Is that right? I mean, that sounds quite extreme.
I don't know about that.
About the technical side, but as long as it certainly, well, that side of it, but it's clearly labelled. Well, should we open it up to some questions? If anyone's got some questions, we have a question down here. I recognise you. We've got a we've got a there we go. Man's carrying a microphone just down here. The lady in the pink dress.
It's for the two guys. Question: We're journalists who write features for the national press. What I'm interested in is your advice on, first of all, obviously you're quite a niche market. We're general features, if you like, human,
Right.
interest, crime, what have you. What advice would you give us as to making money out of the mobile market in our area? And secondly, you mentioned about writing in a different style for, I think you said tablets. I just wondered what sort of style would we write in then? A feature is a feature, I would have thought.
So if I answer the question rightly, so freelancers question really. A lot of freelance journalists here, 3 very good national press features freelance journalists here. What do they need to do in order to still have business and make money? So we'll push and then Luke.
You know what, it's really hard, especially if you're kind of quite general stuff that you're doing. We're very lucky in that we're very niche. That makes it a lot easier for us. To be totally truthful, you know, a lot of the journalists that we use couldn't get work. And these are guys and girls who have been writing for, in some cases, for 20, 30 years for really, really great magazines, like Rolling Stone, like Melody Maker, like Enemy, and they couldn't get work. They're picking up bits and pieces. So I think it's really, really hard. I couldn't get work. That's why I started this myself, because it was the only way we could kind of do it. You know, if I needed to pay myself almost, is the only way I could do it, really. So in terms of advice, I really don't know. It's a simple answer, especially for a general. I mean, you got to try and find where your market is. I mean, the good news is that there are more and more small companies starting up, trying to do it on tablet, on mobile, or on websites as well. Trouble is that a lot of them aren't paying anything. And so you're fighting all the time with people who are prepared to write for nothing. And that makes it doubly harder. You just got to keep looking really for the people, you know, for your places really.
So Luke, any opportunities for freelancers to contribute stuff to BuzzFeed, or are you pretty much staff and user generated?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a features desk in New York for a couple of years now, and we're going to be opening one in London early next year.
About writing in a different style,
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as like pitching for mobile devices. Yeah. I think you should probably be selective about, if you want to write an article that gets a lot of readers on mobile, you should pitch stories to publishers that are good at mobile. So it's not like we're looking for, I mean, it's the same things that underpin a long read in the New Yorker are the same things that make it work on BuzzFeed. They're just brilliantly well-written, compelling stories. So I don't think you'd need to bear mobile in mind really when pitching.
Okay, thanks for that. And Natalie, the BBC's got a lot of staff journalists. I don't know, does it commission much in? Do you know?
We commission some stuff,
Yeah.
but not that much.
Yeah. Okay. More questions? We got. We'll take 2 questions, shall we? Take one from Martin there at the back, and then the chap there at the front there. So Martin there, keep your hand up. Sorry, just so that we can get the mic to hear us.
Just picking up something that Luke said around the homepage, and when you consider how many page views a particular piece of content has got, you're not that bothered about what comes from the homepage. So from your perspective, and also from the perspective of the other guys on the panel, which probably have a different view, is the homepage dead? Does it matter anymore?
That's a good headline. So is the homepage dead?
No, I mean, it obviously is still significant. It's something like 20% of our audience in the UK per day comes via the homepage. I think it would be healthy if it was higher than that. You know, I think that it still has a part to play. I think we think generally most of our audience comes from people discovering articles in their Facebook news feed, and then once they're in there, they'll read. You know, so the thing is with mobile web, the pages per user tends to be quite low. It's lower than people who discover articles on desktop, but the rate at which they share is higher. So they're actually very valuable users, the ones that you can bring in via mobile.
And Natalie, is the homepage dead?
Definitely not. For us, definitely, the
Yeah.
homepage is very important. And I think for everyone, I think it's where you tell people who you are, really. It is, in some ways, it's your shop front. So you do have to look after it. It doesn't mean you have to put all your effort into the homepage anymore, because, as Luke says, you are getting your traffic from other parts, but the homepage still has a place. And even Quartz, who started without one, now decided to have one. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's a gentleman there who had a question. Here you go. There's your mic.
Omar Richards, University of East London. Just listen to the conversations you've just had. I'm now beginning to think that the digital platform in itself is now a specialist sort of journalism, and therefore we would need to be trained. For example, a crime reporter or investigative journalism is a specialist area. Do you see in this modern age, digital platform is a new area that we ought to develop new skills and training in, rather than this, the niche form of journalism? It's a new form.
Yeah, okay. That's a very good question for Natalie, I think. Very good. Just really, so we've got quite a few students here, which is very good at asking questions, it was good to hear. And what are the skills that the digital journalist needs? Do they need particular skills, or is a journalist a journalist?
I think a bit of both. The journalist
Yeah.
is a journalist, but I think you do need some skills. And I think part of the skills come from understanding how people use your content, or how they read it, or how they watch it. And once you become a big user yourself, you'll understand what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of it comes from that. And we've moved people from radio to TV to online, and we move them around. And you see the people who get it best are the people who use it a lot.
Okay. Any particular skills that you have at BuzzFeed that other journalists might not have, or do you try and
It depends what
encourage?
side. There's two sides of BuzzFeed. There's the entertainment side and the news side. The entertainment, that's the lists and the quizzes and the fun stuff. When we're hiring those people, you are looking for a real visual sense. And what's unusual about BuzzFeed, in the past, writers, they just wrote, and then they would send the copy, and then it would be subbed by someone else, and someone else would do the picture research, and someone else would design it. On BuzzFeed, you have to kind of do that all yourself. So for the entertainment side, you are looking for people who are good at Photoshop. They can make their own vines, and who just have a sort of a visual sense of how a post might look. But with news reporters, you're looking for old-fashioned reporting skills. So that's never going to change.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Any more questions? One at the back. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick one. Is there anything scientific, or do you plan during a sort of time of day when you post stuff on mobile? Is there any insight you can give us there into what works at a particular time of day?
So what sort of things work at different times of day? We'll get one for Luke and then Natalie.
Yeah, it's something we puzzle over endlessly, and that we've never really found a solution to it, because we've seen a certain amount of data recently that suggested the biggest viral hits on Facebook are published quite late in the day. But since so much of our traffic doesn't come from when we publish it to BuzzFeed.com, it comes when we put it on the Facebook page. So it's like, what matters more, the time when you publish the article or the time when you share it to all your fans? And we don't know, really. So basically, we don't have any rules about it. We publish stuff when it's done.
Publish it when it's done. Good.
So yeah, we probably should have some better data, but we've never found any hard and fast sort of evidence for certain times of day being better.
Okay, and what about you, Natalie? Different types of things at different types of day?
Yeah, we don't have any rules either, which is strange for us. But we do, I think you need to make sure that, people in the morning want to be able to see the news pretty quickly on their way into work or wherever, so make sure that's done. And we know that in the evening, people are more likely to watch video or read features, so make sure you have a good offer there. So it's about thinking about how people consume across the day, and it's not necessarily planning, but make sure things are prominent, that need to be.
Okay. Any more hands? I saw a hand over there. So we've got one there and one there. I'll dispatch the microphones. See who gets there first. Go on, it's a race. Just there.
Tom Strodwick from the University of East London. How do you think the readers of BuzzFeed value what they're reading as compared to what readers of BBC News Online are reading? And how do you think the material on BuzzFeed is received by the reader?
Well, I think the metric that we use, which is the share, I think that is an extremely good indicator of how moved someone's been by an article, how much they've enjoyed it, because everyone likes to bandy around the term clickbait, which, the term clickbait means that you can trick a user into clicking on a headline via Facebook or via the homepage. And we actually don't do that, because you can trick someone into reading an article, but you can't trick them into then sharing it with all their friends. So I think the fact that BuzzFeed articles get shared so widely on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter is an indicator of how much they're enjoyed by the readers.
Okay, any question down there?
Hi, my name's Andrew. I'm from the Manchester Evening News. So obviously we're a regional publisher and our content will be interested to people in an area, not of an age group or a profession or anything. So we're publishing to a wide age range. Is there anything in that when you're thinking about content for a desktop audience at 1 o'clock and then a mobile audience later in the evening? Would you alter the way the content is worded or put a different content up for a mobile audience, or is that just total rubbish?
Yeah, I think you kind of said you didn't, did you? But so different content for different ages, the older people on the desktops, the younger people on the mobiles. You pretty much put your content up when you put it up, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, and there are differences between the platforms as well. I mean, Twitter is all about what's happening now, which is why news is fantastic on Twitter and live events. Facebook can be much more timeless. You know, it can be an incredibly long tail of traffic with posts on Facebook, and they can be about universal topics. So we often say that like Facebook is for the heart and Twitter is for the head. So so we do kind of think about content in those terms.
Facebook for the heart, Twitter for the head. Okay. We can probably have one more question if there's a burning one. Otherwise, we need to get the PowerPoint calipers out and try and get it back into life before the next session. So apologies for that, Luke, but it was a bit late. But thank you very much. No, I'm not. You're not off the naughty step. It's very good. So can I just thank you very much to all our speakers. That was really really interesting. Thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed. So don't go anywhere because we're going to be moving on to the next session, which is probably the most important session of the day, which is how we make money out of all this. You've got the PowerPoint calipers, chest irons. Oh, really? Oh, right. Okay, we're going to take 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Hi, Nick. All right, brilliant. Right. Is that Alex? You, Alex? Brilliant. That's all right. We've got the full. Okay, good. You haven't got slides, have you?
I have, yeah.
Oh, you got slides, okay. Oh, okay, cool. They're just going to sort that out then. They're sorting slides out. Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah. Where's your office? Is it nearby? Is it? You got
4 floors down. Yeah, you absolutely take it for granted. I look outside all the time, but I'm not, yeah. So if I could always a sharp break, Where are you from? I'm from the IAB. Outside the Greenwich. I know who you are, yeah. I never I'm going to go. Yeah. That'd be a pretty cool show. Unfortunately, won't number, so not know who the IAB are.
Sorry? With the final thing. We're okay for time, actually. We're sort of... And Nick's over here. Nick, do you want to come over and say hello? Yeah. We'll bond before we go on.
What's your strategy? Hi, I'm Abba from Liz. Hi, I'm Alex.
That's Alex there, yeah.
Oh, hello. I am Alex. Successful day so far?
Yeah, really good actually. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for coming. Have you been here for the whole thing, or did you come for the last
I
bit?
came just about an hour ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apologies also about my complete, I had no emails for the last week, really.
Oh, okay.
And we got them back yesterday, but I was out of the office, so apologies for the minute before.
Oh, that's all right.
Replying to you or...
That's all right. Well, I texted you, and I think
Yeah, and I
when
was,
your PowerPoint arrived, I knew we were like,
okay,
I
you're good.
knew we were safe.
I was also underground all day yesterday.
All right. Okay.
In a conference centre where there was no remote.
Yeah. Well, no, everyone's come. Everyone's come. It's been good.
You know, you realise how much you depend on these things when they're taken away from you for 48 hours.
Do you two know each other? No.
No. So I work at the Internet Advertising Bureau. So yeah, advertising. I've got a few slides on our advertising study, shows the size of the market and a bit about the company.
And what, you're going to sort of tell us a bit about how you're making money out of it, I believe.
I've got some neuroscience research that shows that people read a tablet in the same way they read a paper, and that means all the rules about mobile advertising don't apply to newspapers on tablets and mobiles.
Oh, cool.
It would directly contradict her.
Good.
So,
We can.
and it's never been seen before either. It's the first time it's ever.
Oh, cool.
Ever
Have a good story for us then. That's
words
right.
about it.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
We're quite excited about it.
Okay.
So it rolls out to the media planning world in about 3 weeks' time. So we're getting a really early look at it.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Awesome. I can see how they're getting on. Yeah. Okay. Okay, ready? Well done. Great. Okay. I think we should have a round of applause for the technical team. So if I could have everyone's attention, please. Thank you. So we're in the final session. It's flown by. Show me the money. So how we're going to make all this wonderful journalism pay for itself. I'll invite up our three speakers. Take pews wherever you like. That's fine. So we've got Abba Newbury from News UK. He's the Director of Advertising Strategy. Alex Kozlov, who's from the Internet Advertising Bureau, give us an industry-wide overview. Nick Newman, formerly Controller of Future Media, which sounds like a great title, at the BBC. And he wrote a really good report earlier this year, which gave us an absolute kind of overview of where we are in terms of like digital news consumption. So we're going to start off with Nick. He's got some slides. We'll find out if it works. I don't know which button it is. I think it's the.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
There we go.
It works.
So I think you're going to give us a bit of an overview about
yeah,
where
for
we
change
are.
of mood and style.
Yes.
I thought I would kind of just flip through a few charts and hopefully frame the debate about the sort of monetization and commercialization. So I should say this is something we've done every year for the last 3 years, Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford University, and I'm the lead author. It's based on, so all the figures you see are based on a survey which we run every year. So standard survey, 18,000 people in 10 countries. So you also see how the UK fares compared with other countries in some of this data. And I've just picked out some of the stuff about mobile, basically, that I think should be interesting to you. So I won't dwell on this. Obviously, growth. The numbers here basically tell you the percentage of people accessing news via a smartphone every week, and that's grown significantly. So UK now running somewhere around 33% of our sample. What we've seen is some countries have just grown a lot faster than others, but in total, somewhere around a half of the people who have smartphones are accessing news weekly. So a lot of people aren't. So just something worth remembering. Tablet, much smaller numbers, much faster growth. So again, in the UK, if you look at it, 8%, 23% accessing news every week on a smartphone. These are really significant changes. But it's not just the numbers. I mean, obviously, it's not the numbers. It's actually the impact and the change that a lot of people have been talking about today in terms of the different value that's being created through these devices. So increasing frequency with which we access the news, we see that every year in our data, and the more devices you have, the more likely you are to access more frequently, to be addicted to news effectively, so that, as we know, these devices are fueling some kind of addiction to whatever it is. Increasing the access points, so, in the research you talk to people, and the thing that they love is this personal connection. It's just there, it's just at your fingertips, wherever you are. That's really what mobile's about. That's the transformational thing. The personal nature is always with you. And I'll talk a bit more about this. Also, we find tablets and mobiles to different extents actually are encouraging people to pay for news up to a point. So how do people rely on this device? So particularly the smartphone. So when we started tracking this, it was about 3 or 4%. Now 24% across all in the UK say the mobile is their most important way of accessing digital news. That's a massive change in 3 years. For under 45s, 37%. And we've sort of alluded to this already, but not been specific about it. There is a huge difference in terms of demographics between smartphone and tablets. So smartphone, you have this very, very clear under 45, over 45 split, and tablet is completely different. The growth we've seen in the last year is 35 to 44 group so it's getting a little bit older, but it's still basically a younger group. And then tablet, the growth we've seen is in the 44 to 54 group. So very different and very different attitudes to monetization. A couple of things about news apps. We've had a conversation already about news apps. What we find is really interesting. In the era of responsive design, we've seen an increase, significant increase, between the number of people who say they mainly use news apps on both smartphones and on tablets. So apps are more important on smartphones because of the optimization problems than they are on tablets. But we've seen a growth and a fall in mobile browsing. That feels slightly counterintuitive, but it shows that apps are absolutely not going away. Really interesting about brand. So some of the research, and this is across all countries, I'm just showing you UK data, shows that on apps on smartphones, people tend to access fewer news sources every week. In the UK, the fewest of all of the countries, so 55%, so they only access one news source. So there's kind of concentration down to a few small brands that people really know and trust on the one hand. I'll show you the other hand in a minute. But the brands essentially that benefit are the ones who are producing content that works for mobile. So, obviously fast sports-related content, fast-moving content, tend to do better. So the BBC and Sky in particular doing massively better on a mobile than they're doing on a desktop. Whereas the traditional aggregators are doing worse on a smartphone. The ones that grew up in the internet in the PC era, that built their whole business model on portals don't work in a mobile world. How do people start their journeys? So do they start with a branded logo? So from the desktop, do they start mainly via search or mainly via social or mainly via an aggregator? So this is where the role of brand looks a bit weaker. So they may have one or two brands they rely on the first screen, but actually what they're doing is they're increasingly using aggregators or different kinds of aggregators. So aggregator apps is the kind of the new portal, if you like, for smartphones. And we see that you see desktop and tablet fairly similar, but the difference is the smartphone. Operating systems, it's a little bit boring, but it's just worth knowing that we're a little bit like Apple fanboys in the UK, not as much as the Danes, but we really like Apple still. So actually, we're one of the few countries where people have more Apple on tablets than Android. But compare that with Spain, where they're incredibly Android, and people say, well, you can't make money through Android. Well, in Spain, all of the content is on Android, so all of the money is being made on Android. So it partly depends where the split is. That's obviously changing every year and becoming more focused on other operating systems. Multi-platform world, so many people have said it already, don't just create content for mobile. It's not mobile only, it's the fact that mobile is complementary and works with the other media. Mobile is not replacing traditional media, newspapers. Obviously, the ratios are changing, and it's definitely impacting printed newspapers. But 84% of people who have a smartphone watch TV news every week. 40% of people who have a smartphone read newspapers. That's the only one where it's much lower in the mix. And similarly for tablets. So this is definitely a multi-screen, multi-platform world. It's not a mobile world. And then the generational split is incredibly stark. I already showed you those figures about the tablet and the mobile. But what you see here is the different behaviors across the day of the over 45s and the 18 to 24s. So over 45s still love the edition, you know, early evening, first thing in the morning, lunchtime. 18 to 24s, always on. They want the news when they want the news, effectively. So just two final slides on paying for news. Overall, and this is relevant to mobile and everything else, overall, very small numbers of people are prepared to pay for news in any form. So there's a subscription or one-off apps or in-app purchases or any kind of it. The UK, least of any country it's that we study of 7%, and it's not shifting very much. So that's, on the one hand, not very good. On the other hand, you know, there's plenty of room for growth depending on your what we have seen in the last year is more people who are prepared to have a relationship with a brand that they trust. So we've seen significant increase in ongoing subscription from 43% to 59% across all the countries we look at. That's a really very significant change. And that's obviously because the news organizations themselves are trying to encourage those regular ongoing payments. And so we're seeing more of that. And who's paying for online news? It's still, so far, a pretty limited subset of the overall population. So mainly male, very well educated. They're people who are very interested in news. And you have to remember there's only a small percentage of those people who are therefore going to pay in a world when news is incredibly freely available elsewhere. And interestingly, 43% use tablet for news. So most of the monetization is happening on tablets. It's not happening on smartphones. Obviously, advertising is a different picture. So what does all this mean? Apart from go and click on the slides, they're all available on SlideShare. There's a huge deck if you're interested in more. I think it's confusing. I think it's hard to tell sometimes. I think the interesting thing is for brands. You know, on the one hand, there's this amazing opportunity if you've got a brand that you can make an indispensable, distinctive service to be on that front page of someone's personal experience. You have to fight for that, and some brands are going to be there. And the Times app, we heard about it earlier, for some people, it's doing that. On the other hand, you know, mobiles and tablets is not the new nirvana that's going to recreate the bundle and solve at a stroke the monetization problems. And you know, there are a whole load of new problems. So maybe some of the portals have gone away, but you're getting the flipboards and the new aggregators. So there's a whole load of new challenges, and we just have to ride that incredibly complex wave.
Thank you, Nick. Brilliantly informative PowerPoint display. Glad we got it working. Great. We'll come back to you with some more questions. We'll move on quickly now to Alex Kozlov from the Internet Advertising Bureau. We'll pass the baton over. Let's press the button and see if just check it is you. Then we go back to you. That's you. Great. Okay. Over to you.
Lovely. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I work at a trade body called the Internet Advertising Bureau, which is a non-for-profit. So I'm kind of not coming to you with any journalism expertise. You guys know much more than me, but I do have a bit of knowledge in advertising, and I just wanted to share that and build on what Nick said. Actually, a lot of the trends we see with consumers too. I've got a couple of slides just to show you. We see similar stuff where people are actually consuming more media than they are sleeping now. So far more, actually, when you consider the stacking of media, 11 hours a day in 2014. And it's actually historically, you guys in this room, the publishers have been one of the most, I guess, the quickest to get your stuff ready for mobile, because you've seen that the eyeballs are going there. What I think is really interesting is now you're seeing other sectors like retailers catching up with that. And that's because of, I just for a bit of context, stuff like this happening. The tipping point is not just for you guys anymore, like we were just hearing from the BBC that happened, you know, a year or years ago. We're now seeing in Q2 2014 that actually over half of traffic to retail sites is coming from smartphone and tablets. So I expect to see this roll across, you know, many different industries, but it's a really key time for getting mobile and tablet right, not just for you guys, but for sort of everybody in the world. So we know it's important, right? And we know how consumers feel about it. Thanks to Nick. But what I really wanted to focus on today was some results from a biannual study we do at the IAB. And we work with PwC. And what we do is we measure the size of the digital advertising market every half year. I'm just going to show you the mobile stuff, although we do measure digital overall. If you want that, it's available on our website. The way we do it is just worth touching on, right? What we do is we work with all the people who make money out of advertising on digital platforms. We ask them every half year to anonymously, well not anonymously, but privately submit their spend data that they're getting in from advertisers. We aggregate it all and make it into a sensible number that we then release. It's just in terms of advertising display. It doesn't account for, say, the cost of creating that advert. The cost of maybe an app build, that's not included in this sizing study. It's literally just the media spent in the mobile space. So I just wanted to show, and these are participants from the H1 2014. So this has very recently come out for half year of this year, how much money was spent in advertising in mobile. So that's what this is. I'll show you the first big number. I think enough of that. So in mobile alone in H1 2000, so just a half year number, right? So in mobile alone, it was £707 million spent. And you can see the growth of 60% on a like-for-like basis. So comparing those who submitted both H1 and H1 2013 and H1 2014. I mean, I guess the easier way to look at the growth is to consider it was, £429 million in this time a year ago, and it's now 707. So it's a pretty significant growth. I think it's one way of looking at it. But I guess it's worth probably going into a bit more detail, because what does that really mean? Some of it's maybe not so applicable to you in the room here, because we're seeing still the lion's share of that number, that figure, going through to search advertising. Actually, a year ago, it was more, 62% of mobile advertising was coming through search. And we're seeing, encouragingly, a larger amount coming through display advertising. So 45% in H1 2014. And I think the display is probably the bit that we're most interested in here in this room. So I'll just focus in on that for a bit. So that 45% translates out into £315 million in H1 2014. And actually, for the first time this wave, we have been able to break out what percentage of that is content and native, which I think you guys have been talking about a lot today, and is a seriously hot topic in my industry. And actually, we're seeing that that's taking a larger share, 143 million, 144, compared to standard display, the banners and the MPUs and the interstitials that we often talk about. So standard display was worth £105 million in H1 2014. So as I say, this is the first time we were able to split out that, and I wasn't too surprised to see that content and in-feed was so huge. It's food for thought. I guess the one thing to bear in mind when looking at this is this includes things from BuzzFeed's beautiful sponsored stories, also to Facebook's in-feed advertising and Twitter's in-feed advertising. It's kind of two slightly different beasts, and that's also driving a lot of the growth in that area, the social players, because as we know, social and mobile go hand in hand. In terms of growth, sorry, one more thing. We also measure how much of standard display, that £105 million, is rich media. So in other words, rather than just when you click on a banner, it takes you through to kind of old school microsite, there's actually interaction within the banner. You see it a bit more nowadays. You see like games or puzzles or videos actually within the ad unit itself, kind of a bit more advanced advertising. So we're seeing that just 42% of the market, which again, a year ago was about 20%. So a huge growth in this more creative, rich type of standard display advertising. In terms of the growth figures, I mean, just to kind of throw a few up, again, you can see here the rise in standard display, where we can split out the standard versus content. But one thing I also wanted to pick on was mobile video, which has grown 196% since H1 2013. And really actually the quickest growing ad format across the whole of the ad spend study, even more than video. Any other format, online and tablet, wherever, mobile video was the real star. So that's also a really exciting opportunity, I think, for you guys in this room. Last two slides is kind of more about the past and the future. So we've been doing this study since 2008, and it's been a fascinating change in the market to see that mobile now takes 20% of digital advertising overall. Again, looking at display, actually that goes up to 31%. So 3 out of every £10 spent in digital advertising is now going, digital display advertising is now going on mobile. So massively picking up speed compared to 0.8% in 2008. And I remember that. It was a tough journey. And lastly, just to finish with a forecast that we haven't done, but I think it is based on our numbers from eMarketer. Sorry that it's gone a little bit weird here, but the point remains really that in 2015, eMarketers say that mobile ad spend will be 21% of all ad spend, right? Across media, across TV, across press. 21%, a fifth of all ad spend. The growth in pace is really quite astonishing. That's next year. So there is, I guess, hopefully this is good news for you because there is money to be made to back up the journalism that is being done. And, you know, it's not always easy. And I know there's a lot of problems, which I'm sure we'll kind of chat about, but the market is growing phenomenally fast. So there should be a great model for you guys going forward. I didn't do anything wrong.
That's all right. It's still up there.
Don't press anything. So I think that's pretty much it from me. I hand
Thanks,
back
Alex.
to you, Dom.
That's a great overview of the money side. It's good to know there is some money there.
Yeah.
I think I sort of said that, well, it's, you know, it's very difficult to display. There is a lot of display advertising on mobile. A quick question, and I don't know whether you can answer it, but I'll ask you anyway. Any idea what proportion of that 700 million in H1 of mobile advertising, any idea what proportion of that is available to us as people who are producing journalism and content?
So it depends on your strategy, right?
Yes.
So if you're doing the content type strategy,
Yeah.
in theory, all of that, so I can go back, in theory, all of that, £249 million as display could be open to you. If you've only got a standard banner strategy, then it would be just at 105. If you've got mobile video, you could probably put that on top. So it's around those kinds of figures. The 707, you know, seems like a lot more when you take out the search. These kinds of figures are probably more you should be basing your forecasts on.
Google's getting that search money. Okay, good. Thanks very much for that. Flick us forward to the end. Sorry, so we've got that. Well done. Brilliant. That's good. Brilliant. Okay. Now our final speaker of the day, Abby Newbury from News UK, Director of Advertising Strategy. I think she's got some very interesting research she can share with us. Over to you.
I'm conscious that it's the last presentation of the day, and I'm about to utter those terrible words, neuroscience, and you're all going to groan, but I promise I'll be brief. It helps me to understand how, if you could just raise your hands, how many people in the room work in the commercial side of the business, so marketing or advertising? Okay, not many. So I'll give you a very quick kind of overview of the advertising marketplace. It essentially splits into two. You've got digital and traditional, and they're built on very different models as far as advertising is concerned. So the traditional model is highly engaged audiences, spend a lot of time watching a TV program or reading a newspaper or listening to radio, and the advertising within it funds that content model. And because people are paying quite a lot of attention to those programs, the advertising in it has high levels of recall and high levels of kind of brand response as a result. And then you've got the digital economy, which has rapidly spiraled in the last 15 years and is essentially built on scale. I want to build the biggest audience I possibly can. And those audiences are huge, enormous. Google, Facebook, millions, billions. I'm not sure what's bigger than a trillion, but you know, millions of people, and they're constantly acquiring. And those people consume very small amounts of digital content with them. So even if you look at a kind of I think you have BuzzFeed here. If you're getting people to read 6, 7, 8, 10 articles on your website, you're doing a really good job, because the way that material is presented to us through the web is actually designed to create some kind of attention deficit disorder. It asks us to jump around. It says, oh, you like that? Do you want this? Try this, la, la, la. And so that's the behavior that we've created for people. So we, obviously sitting in the traditional side, we asked ourselves, is that digital or is that self-fulfilling prophecy? Do people consume material through digital because of the way we presented it to them, because of the way we designed websites, or is there a different way? And can you take everything that advertisers were prepared to pay huge premiums for, engaged audiences, a long time, high concentration levels, can we return that to the digital space. So I know you'd have heard Alan Hunter earlier on probably extolling the virtues of the Times tablet. And the Times tablet is built on a linear, traditional reading model. So it's designed to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You spend a certain amount of time with it, and then you put it down, and the experience is over. You may choose to come back to it during the day. So it's digital, though. It's digital. It's consumed on an app, on a tablet. It's a digital experience. In the world of the IAB's revenue figures, it's going to get digital advertising revenue, not traditional advertising revenue. And we were thinking, is that right? What if we could really understand how people are consuming that content? So we did neuroscience, and that is literally putting people in a room with like metal helmets on, measuring their brain power. And you can't hide, so you can't claim, oh yeah, no, I really read that article. We can actually see in your brain whether you're paying any attention or not. And I really hope that no one in here is like a neuroscience expert or a psychologist, because I'm going to be found wanting when you ask me questions. But there's basically 4 bits that go on in your brain when you're consuming that horrible word content, and that is, what are you actually remembering? So you know that bit when you got to the end of the the TV show, or your other half comes in and they go, what are you watching? And you're like, I don't know. Or I can't really remember what's just happened. There's the kind of engagement. So do actually I have a personal relationship with this content? Is it relevant to me, or am I just kind of consuming it? Am I getting a payback? Am I feeling energized? Am I feeling different? Is it kind of mood altering and attention? So actually, are you paying attention? Are the synapses in your brain triggering off, and therefore we know that you're doing something as a result? And those are the kind of 4 metrics behind neuroscience. So all we did was put people reading a newspaper, people reading a tablet in a room, and we measured their brain output to see whether it was the same or different. So one of the first things we tested was flicks, right? Because if you ever read it on a tablet, right, you flick all the time, right? So our hypothesis was, because you're flicking all the time, you're skimming through the articles really quickly, and therefore you'll remember less. That was our hypothesis. Fact is, you do flick in print, but you flick with your eyes, so you're less physically conscious of the flicking. So what this is telling us is you flick less in print because you're having to turn the page, but actually if you take memory encoding and how much you remember, the flicks and the eye flicking is exactly the same, and you're taking out exactly the same amount of information from a tablet, i.e. a digital product, as you are from a newspaper, which is not what we expected. The other thing was that digital's kind of cold. It's, you don't have a relationship with digital. You just go on, you read a couple of articles, you go on to the next, you move on to Facebook. And what we see here is that although there is a slightly different reading experience happening, you're a little bit more emotionally involved with the paper. That's not surprising. It's a printed, visceral product. You're a bit more visually attentive in a tablet product, but that's not surprising, because we're going to put a bit more video on it, and the high resolution and very strong image graphics. But actually, the size of those triangles is the same. So the actual memory imprint on your brain of reading the newspaper on the tablet and the newspaper imprint is exactly.
Can I ask a question?
No.
How do you know? Do you actually look at the bits of the brain? Is there an emotional bit of the brain, other bits of the brain they're lighting up on the helmet?
I said no questions about neuroscience. But yes, essentially, so we have a bunch of scientists out in Australia who take away all the data from the different sides of your brain, from the kind of right lobe and left lobe, and that shows which parts of your brain are triggering, and therefore where it's entering into your head. Wow. We didn't do that. I'd like to claim that I did. And I won't go through these charts in detail, but what these kind of are saying is the kind of the pink and the blue are the paper and the tablet, and what you're seeing is a very, very similar pattern across all sections of the newspaper. So we are seeing people take print reading habits into a digital environment, and those habits are remaining the same. And because I work in advertising, it would be remiss of me not to go on and talk about advertising. And the great thing for us from an advertising perspective is that is working in exactly the same way. So back to my original point about digital tends to have much lower CPM or CPT value compared to a newspaper. What we're able to prove here is that in our digital environment, the advertising is having the same impact, therefore should be charged at the same price. One of our fears was that that we have our pages that run between articles on the tablet, so you have to flick past them. And one of our fears was that was meaning that you weren't paying attention to them. actually the nature of the flick, i.e. you're having to physically engage with the page of advertising in order to get away from it, means that you have very high level memory encoding of that. So the flicking process is actually helping you remember the advert in your brain. So that's very exciting for us. What it means, we believe, is that we can take everything that's been great about a newspaper and challenge everything that we're starting to believe to be true about the digital world.
Very good. Thank you very much. We should have done this session first, shouldn't we? This is the intellectual part of the day. So, just quick question for you, Abbott. Are the advertisers kind of buying into this, or are you on a journey with this? Are you making the same amount of money from the 70,000 Sunday Times tablet readers in advertising as you are from the 70,000 print readers, or something approaching it? I mean,
that's where we want to get to.
Yeah.
As you know, agencies aren't structured in that way. So agencies have structured themselves into TV buying departments, print, national press buying departments, and digital buying departments. And our biggest challenge is actually to say, no, we don't want to talk to the digital buyers. We'd like to talk to the national press buyers, because they're reading a newspaper through a digital medium rather than reading a website. So you can't plan us in the same way. So it's challenging, but as you say, an interesting intellectual challenge as well.
But as it stands, you can't simply add on the 70,000 to the print ones and say, come on, guys, you need to pay for them all together. Or you could try, I guess. But
and that's the purpose of this research, is to prove that the advertising response is the same.
Okay. And I've got a quick question for Nick. So you're a sort of independent person, I guess, who can give us an overview on this. What's your sense in terms of the all this extra challenge that we're getting from mobile, all the extra readers? Is it a good thing for us or a bad thing? Is it something that's disruptive to our business models, or do you think ultimately it's something that we're going to get a net gain from?
Yes, it's definitely disruptive. It's another wave of disruption, and we're having to rethink. The advertisers are having to rethink, and they're way behind, aren't they? Because if you just hear all the statistics about passing the tipping point, and we're still at 15% or whatever it is in terms of mobile advertising spend. So we actually haven't worked out how to, or the advertisers haven't worked out, and the publishers together haven't worked out how this stuff should work, and I don't expect that's going to happen for a few years. So we're definitely in this transition where it's very challenging, and building the value and making the case in a world where inventory is infinite. That's really the problem. That's the difference. And they can go to Facebook, can't they, and reach the same audience who are selling on audience. I can give you A/B. The people you want to reach, I can give you them at scale. Facebook are even doing this with television now, so it's not just print. So the scale of the problem is absolutely enormous, but I think the strategy is absolutely right. It's about building up and showing through evidence that you have a compelling proposition that is personal, that has warmth and can be digital too, and that deserves a place on the front of your tablet or your mobile. That's the aim. And that is a real struggle. It involves the commercial and the editorial side of the business working together to create experiences that really work digitally. I believe not are just replicas of newspapers. They have to reinvent what that means in a world where media is going to be personal.
And just for you, Alex, with the do you get a sense that the overall advertising pie available to publishers, print and online, is that going down still, or is that going up again?
Yeah, the advertising pie continues to grow, and actually, a lot of that growth is being driven by the digital stuff. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with both what you guys are saying. It's a really tricky one, because what we're seeing is, without doubt, consumer change, right? And we all know, we see ourselves when we see all the stats. Consumers are changing far faster than the industry. You mentioned advertisers. We measure it, we're at a point where only 64% of the top 100 advertisers have a mobile optimized website, and that's the top 100. So that we've been talking about mobile for a few years now, and they're very slow to change. But digital is pushing growth, and there are amazing things being done by advertisers and who are, doing unique things on digital and not just trying to replicate a press experience, because actually I don't think anybody in the value chain wants that. Everyone wants a sort of bespoke, thing that works best for both the consumer and the publisher. So yeah, there is growth and exciting stuff.
Good to hear. Right. Well, if we open up to the floor, anyone got any questions about how they can make money journalism online? Question at the back there. There we go. We'll wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, Duncan Wright, Express Newspapers. It's a mixed-in one about the BBC. Is it a unique country with the BBC and the pay-for subscriptions, and then thus the advertising reach that follows? Are we going to be different to the way the global trends are because of the fact that the BBC is free to air for all?
So say again. So the question being that the UK being uniquely problematical because of the BBC.
Yeah. As a result, the growth in the website and the unique viewers is possibly not as high, and then the advertising reach that we can offer in the UK won't be as high.
Well, I think it's a complicated one, isn't it? On the one hand, the BBC has developed the digital market faster in the UK than in others. So in some senses, you might say that that's made it worse for newspapers. It's made it harder to do the transition quickly, but you've had to do it anyway. And I think that the real problem is there are going to be in every country free newspapers. I mean, look at the United States. They're going to be free content. So if you're trying to build a paid model, you are going to be up against a BuzzFeed or a CNN or whatever. So the problem is not the BBC. The BBC is obviously a very large player in the UK market in terms of scale, but you can still reach audiences. It's not competing in any way for the advertising, and public service broadcasters are in other countries. So you have a number of advantages which other countries don't have as well.
And in terms of advertising, the UK absolutely leads. So it doesn't seem the dollars are looking good.
Okay. Another question down here.
You mentioned, Alex, this is a question for you, 196% rise in video advertising since H1 2013, which is massive. Are advertisers seeing a commensurate rise in income in line with the production of video advertising content?
So is it working?
Basically, yes.
I mean, we've done lots of studies to say, yes, it is. Basically, it's depends obviously on the creative and all that kind of stuff. I mean, without giving away too much detail, a lot of that growth is coming from players like YouTube, right? It's probably not too much of a state secret to say that, but there's tons of case studies to show the effectiveness of it, and actually the kind of skippable ads on YouTube kind of speak for themselves. If consumers aren't watching it, then pay for it as an advertiser. So it's kind of the proof is really in the pudding there.
Isn't most of the revenue coming from long form video? Whereas, you have this real problem with putting a 30-second pre-roll in front of short form, which is what most people in the news.
So that only measures pre and post roll.
Okay.
So there's probably a whole bunch of lovely advertorial kind of long form video, which we're not even capturing in that, which would be nice to actually look to capture. So there is still significant amounts of pre and post roll, but because of that control that a lot of the video players are giving to the consumer with the ability to skip, and like I say, the advertiser doesn't pay for that. So you're really only paying for what you get.
Okay. And is that something you're finding, Abba? Sorry, just going to say that in terms of the video that you're producing here, in terms of paying for itself in terms of advertising, or helping to cover itself?
It's really easy to look into the medium that's growing the quickest and go, let's do loads of video. YouTube are doing really well. The biggest players in video are ITV, Channel 4 and Sky. Because we as consumers, as you know, will choose to, catch up on the TV that you didn't watch last night online. And what they've cleverly done is understand that and extend their audience propositions to their advertisers. So they have got high quality, high value advertising propositions that are extending the advertisers who are spending £300,000 on making a beautiful ad, and you're now able to watch it on your tablet, on your website too. The other side of video is that it's bought programmatically. And that's where the majority of the growth is coming. So it is not valuing the environment in which the ad is sitting. It is valuing purely the eyeball. So it is a computer algorithm saying, I want to reach as many 16 to 34-year-old people as I possibly can. Please, can you get me as many of those people? I'm not prepared to pay above this price for that. I don't care about the environment. And when I've reached 10 million of them, please, can you stop? And the challenge for us as publishers is that the environment in which your ad is therefore being shown has absolutely no value. And so my question would be, why would we do that? Why would we say that the content in which you sit is not as important as the person who's consuming it? We're publishers. So I think video is an incredibly important part of our strategy and something we look at constantly, but we don't look at it purely as let's chase where the money is.
Okay. Any more questions? At the front here.
Kevin Quinn from the local newspaper around here, Southwark News. We're very much on print and having to make that move over. Do you find that it's simply a case that you have to package things up? Because you will never make really as much as you will on print unless you do what The Sun has done, the digital tablet platform. So is there other ways on the mobile that you can make more money and just do that in isolation, or try and keep on encouraging people to do your print media by offering them a package that gives them everything, mobile, print, you know? So is that the best form of making sure you keep your revenue going?
That's probably a good question for Nick, isn't it? So it really is.
Well, I think ultimately, if you're trying to tell stories locally, you have to tell stories in ways that your readers or viewers want to get those stories. And I think the audiences are turning to digital. So you have to provide that digitally. I mean, we heard a great example of people who are building up from mobile first, not a bad strategy, keep it simple, start with mobile and then build it up in a really simple way. So if you haven't started yet, then it doesn't cost that much money to make that start and to focus in that way. But you have to move to digital.
Yeah, in terms of commercials, I mean, different publishers actually do it in different ways. And I think have experimented, you guys probably gone through a few different ways of trying to get the market right. And it is a bit of trial and error, I'm guessing. I'm not having done it myself, so you'll know much more about it. So some people will just package up a full-page press ad, and that'll appear the same in your newspaper and your tablet edition, and sometimes you might charge more for it, sometimes they just include it in the price, sometimes it's all completely sold separate inventory, sometimes the inventory is traded programmatically using basically a robotic exchange, it sounds more scary than it is, to just fill the inventory without having any kind of salesperson having to kind of knock on doors and get IO. So I guess basically there's a few different things you can do to package it up. It's definitely worth building, right? Because if the people are there, if you don't build it, the eyeballs will just go.
And also
elsewhere.
the platform supports local. As you go to support location, open up whole new markets in advertising for locals. So mobile is definitely something that local should be very interested in indeed.
Yeah, I mean, we say it's not so much about platform, and you use the words personalization, and we say it's not about personalization, we say it's about consumer choice. And as soon as we give our consumers a package, and say you can read the paper, or you can read the mobile, or you can read the tablet, they read it more often. And if they read it more often, they build a better relationship with us over time, which means they're far more likely to be a loyal subscriber, they're far more likely to buy other associated products from us. And in my world, they're also more likely to respond to the advertising. So we definitely think that it's about consumer choice in the way that they're going to consume your products across platform.
Any more questions? But one thing I would just say to that point, which I'll just chip in because I can, is that the big thing that we've seen in Prescott the last couple of years is local websites. When people go web only with local websites, when they get really successful and big, they all launch print editions. Because that's where they see the ways of really making a serious amount more money. They seem to find it very hard to monetize a purely digital proposition with a local level. They launch in print. So, I mean, which is, I think, encouraging for print people. Question there, two more questions, yeah. So one from John, then one from the guy next to him.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, John Bernstein. Abba, I just wanted to pick up on that final slide that you showed, which seems to suggest that the tablet activity or involvement with the advert is very, very short. It's a fraction of the time compared to print, but all the right brain activity is happening. If you were to do some research in terms of people recalling those adverts, would you still come up with that positive result?
Yes, and we have. And it's exactly the
So
exactly the
even though
same.
it's a tiny amount of time people are spending, they're literally flicking through, their recall is just as good as print.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
I'm sure I read somewhere that people take in stuff from print better than they do on screen, on desktops. Is that quite old hat now? You're saying your research is showing that people.
Well, what we're seeing is that it's that swiping motion.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing the ad in the middle of an article rather than alongside an article as you do in the printed product.
Yeah.
You're having to swipe over it. Now that physical engagement is triggering more synapses and neurons in your brain, which means you're more likely to get to that memory encoding bit, i.e. advertising recall. But what we haven't gone out in is kind of understand absolutely the kind of depth of messaging. We would argue that depth of messaging happens over frequency rather than a single consumption of a printed ad anyway. So if you want that to be my next project, total takeout of advertising, we can definitely do that.
You can wear the tin hat.
Yeah, actually, anyone who does want to volunteer, you're most welcome.
Question.
Oh yeah, my name is Stephen Maguire. I have some regional websites over in Ireland, and we've reached the tipping point about a year and a half ago where we're 60-40 now, all on mobile, and we have apps and stuff. But you said there, Abba, just in relation to the, you're talking about the flicking process and stuff. We don't have a kind of a tablet version. We just have a kind of a wrapper, per se, so you just go through it and you press your adverts and stuff. The problem we're having from advertisers is they say they're just flicking, they don't see the ads at all. They're just completely bypassing them. And, whereas they say the desktop works a lot better for them and they prefer the desktop to have their adverts on the desktops as opposed to on the mobile. Is there any suggestions the panel might have for ways of getting around that on the mobile, making ads stand out more? Or
your question's about if I'm right, about the challenge of getting these mobile display advertising slots.
Yeah. We just have static ones now at the moment. When you flick in, we have drop-in ads and stuff, but the advertisers are saying to us the readers just aren't.
Okay. I mean, you didn't really talk about that. I mean, you talked about tablet, but I mean, are you having a challenge with these mobile display ads and desktop display ads?
I've challenged it the other way around, actually. So an impression means someone has read your article for 1 full second, right? That would have been on that screen for 1 full second. So therefore they're skimming the content, and what we don't look at is quality of impressions. So we're not looking and measuring as a business is how many of those people actually went on to read the article. So when we look at the dwell time of our pages and our websites, for example, we see that the bottom left actually of an article is the most effective place to advertise, because that means the person has read the article. They've gone through it, they're interested in the content, and they're having a strong response to the advertising at the top. Advertising at the top right-hand side is that bit where you're kind of scrolling in and out and you're not reading the article. So we would argue that actually display advertising, and I think the FT actually are doing some really pioneering work, that actually display advertising on all kind of web should start to look at time spent rather than believing that an impression is an effective measure of whether someone's seen the ad or not.
I was going to say that some publishers are starting to try and define viewability by a number of seconds and certainly build in these attention metrics. Because if it is about attention, and you talked earlier about attention, and I think it is increasingly when you think of all the distractions, then there has to be a premium for attention. So for quality publishers, it seems that the crucial thing is to change the advertisers into an attention model.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, it's like I'd also question how your clients were measuring the effectiveness. Often it is still the click-through, and it doesn't work as a measurement tool, it feeds directly into what these guys are saying, that it's, attention, engagement in much more effective ways. So it might be worth spending a bit of time with them and chatting through what they're seeing that they don't like. Do you know what I mean? And it might just be a few click-throughs, and you might find a way around it. You can prove to them that it is working.
Another question here.
One thing all the speakers have spoke about here is content. Now, we are content providers, that is our job. I do actually feel a bit disheartened, like with the poor relations of this. Everyone's making money through this, but us really. And what I'd be interested to know is, And I'm talking, you know, in a couple of years' time. So, I mean, I haven't even got a website set up. But if I do, and I sell content to News UK, how do I make money as an individual trader on my content? Well, obviously, apart from being paid for the story, we also need to generate more income from our own websites as well, although you're probably not interested. But that's what's got, as more and more journalists going freelance, that's what's going to, you know, we're setting up websites, we've got to make as much money from each story we provide.
There's a great way of monetizing content, and this is a massive reason why the blogger has become so big, the vlogger, depending on the scale, but it's affiliate marketing, which is where you can set up revenues will come in from any purchases that come through your website. And you know, if you have that going and you're creating content, display advertising is one way to monetize it. Affiliate marketing is a great way. And I think a big part of why this kind of community has grown so quickly in the UK due to the strength. So affiliate marketing, I think it's worth £8 billion a year. So there's a lot of money to be made there as well, and a fantastic opportunity for you.
Find out about that, for example?
From the IAB website.
Just in a sort of layman's terms, how do you do that? How do you get some of this affiliate marketing action?
So there's
Is it a
affiliate
widget you can get.
Affiliate marketing companies. You can work with them. Affiliate Net, Affiliate Window, and basically, as a content provider, you can set it up that if someone, let's say, I'm doing a fashion blog, and I say I like these shoes. I bought these shoes in Office. Someone goes and clicks on through to the Office website and buys them for £45. I get a percentage of that as the content provider. And there's a direct, you get a proportion of all the sales, or it doesn't actually have to be about sales, it can also be the content that you drive. It can be eyeballs, but most often it's sales, there's a real retail angle. And that provides a lot of income for content creators in the UK.
You start writing about shoes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be shoes. It could be anything. It could be, it
Or
works
things that
across
people
all
buy.
sorts of sectors.
One more question there at the back there. I recognise that person.
Thanks. You talked about how content and native advertising have now overtaken display advertising. How do advertisers using content marketing and native advertising actually measure whether it's working or not?
For me?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think it's very different. Content and native covers a lot. It's a very big bucket. So classic advertorial compared to an in-feed Facebook ad, I think will be measured often in different ways. And I think it's kind of the classic, it depends on the objectives of the advertiser, really, as to how it's measured. Unfortunately, still, we do see a lot of click-through as the measurement tool, and it shouldn't be the case for really any kind of advertising, but particularly in content and native. So I think engagement, again, is used a lot, but for the more advanced brands, they might even use, brand trackers and stuff to back that up, and that is being picked up now increasingly digital as part of the kind of wider econometrics brand tracking activity that brands do to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. But whatever happens, I would not suggest click-throughs as the way to measure it.
Okay. Well, look, thanks very much to all of these three speakers today, this final session. Thank you very much to all the speakers today. Thank you to News UK, who've been very generous hosts. We're very appreciative. I'll just, a little bit of insight for you. It's been free the first 2 years of this conference. This year we've charged. We've got more people come, and they've been more engaged because they've all turned up. So read into that what you will. But I hope you've all found it worthwhile. If you need to get any more information, we're going to have all the slides up on the Press Gazette website. We'll have the whole day on, hopefully on video on the Press Gazette website, so you can look at it there. So I just direct you towards the bar, and I direct you to please just to show your appreciation for everyone who's given up their time today. Thank you very much. Yeah, so please stay for a drink over here.